Do you guys want to hear a scary story? What better way to break in the new place than to tell you guys a scary story about what happened when I was moving out of my old place. This place has amazing energy, but let's get into it. Okay, so I definitely think whatever was at my old place, didn't want me to move, obviously. Cold. So, second to the last night I stayed at my old place. I was having a really hard night this night, specifically. I was kind of going through things on my own, sad about my breakup, and I'm having a bad night already. My energy and my vibration is low. Sorry. Guys, you gotta remember I have a stutter. Okay. So this specific night, I had cried myself to sleep. I had done most nights the past month. But I had drank some wine, so I was a little tipsy. So when sometimes you have wine, you sleep extra good almost, because at least for me, wine will knock me out, right? So I wake up and not fully wake up. I was coming out of sleep and I thought I was dreaming at first, and then I hear mommy, and it sounds like my daughter's voice. And so instantly I'm listening, and I hear, mommy, come here. And I realized, guys, as I'm sitting up, immediately the panic sets in. She's with her dad. My daughter was not home. It's 3 a.m. And I hear her voice coming from her room across the side of the apartment. Mommy. So once that instantly clicks for me, whether I'm kind of deep sleep or not, I obviously know if my child is home or not, And I'm there's just no way. My baby dad would not come try and get into my house in the middle of the night and bring my daughter over there. I knew this was I was either hallucinating or having a dream. I knew she wasn't in the house, but guys, it sounded just identical to her little voice. It was insane. So I sit up straight, and I sleep in the dark. I can't sleep with lights on. It's gotta be pitch black. So I'm looking out of the door, my bedroom door, and you kind of see the living room and kitchen, and then around the living room and the kitchen is where her room is. It's all the way in the back. And then I'm staring out in the dark, and I'm God, I don't know why, but that just scared me so much worse. And I don't normally get scared. I think it's because my daughter, obviously it sounded just like her, and it messed with my head. Because as if you're a parent, you hear your child's voice and you're instantly go into panic mode. I'm okay, maybe I'm just having a bad dream, everything is fine, right? Oh, I already chills. So anyways, I'm starting to slowly lay back down, and I see out of the corner of my eye, it looked like something small was running across the living room, but it was it was small. And then I'm putting two and two together. Remember I told you guys another story time how the thing that's been coming in my house, the entity, crawls on the floor. It looks small in that way, height wise. And I was just God, no. I was already having a night from hell. And obviously, if you have had paranormal experiences, you know that things feed off your energy. If you are sad, if you are depressed, whatever it is, you're gonna get fed on and attacked so much harder. And I was not in a good headspace. The past month I was there, I was very sad, very distraught, very depressed, the whole nine. And I closed my eyes really tight, and then I feel my bed move. Okay, so I close my eyes tight, and I feel the bed move, the bed frame though. I almost felt when my dog would lay against my bed, or when she'd walk past and bump into it. It was a subtle bump, something bumped into the bottom of the bed, and I'm I just start breathing heavily, and I pull the covers over my head, and I'm no. I just I start praying immediately. I don't know why I was so freaked out. I normally don't get freaked out. I was freaking out. And then from outside of the blanket, I feel it feels like something is coming. This happens to me too much. This is happening with this entity too much. It crawls on the bed, it tries to come at me. I feel the bed is moving. I feel something is crawling onto it from the floor. It almost felt an imprint, a body getting in it, but half of a body. And I'm crying my eyes out, and the deepest voice suddenly goes, mommy. Guys, I almost shit myself. It came from right outside of the blanket. I was covering myself with a blanket, and I just hear mommy, but it's deep, and it is demonic sounding. And I know immediately, obviously this thing is trying to fuck with me. And I always think in these times where I've been called or it's trying to call me into like that, I'm like, why does it want me to go out of my room and go to where it is? Like, just, it freaks me out. And then it's like it comes like to find me. I started screaming. And like, that's not something I ever do. Okay, when I get scared, I don't like scream. And I started screaming. And I was just like, I couldn't come out of the blanket. It scared me so bad. I'm praying on overtime mode. And I had my phone like under the blanket with me. And I picked up my phone. And I was about to call my best friend because I just didn't know what to do. I was not well. But I was like, no, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm not going to wake anybody up. But I didn't sleep. I got up for the day. So after that happened, I like pep talked myself. I turned on every light in the house. I made coffee and I didn't go back to bed. That was the most harrowing. I just hate it because it's like, it's my daughter's my world. And I feel like it was feeding off of that. Like I don't like that, using like my daughter to try to get into my head, like mimicking her voice. It was very dark, very dark. And I can tell you guys right now, there is nothing in this apartment. I always tell people to cleanse your space in your home before you move into it, but also, every religion is different in culture, so make sure you're looking into that before you're doing it. I know what works for me and what I can do. I made a mistake on not fully cleansing and blessing the home that I lived in before. This baby is like Fort Knox in here, and the energy is so great. But that's it for now. At least we are moving on to better things and less scary things. Bye.
So this guy says when he first started dating his wife was when they were in school, and every Friday he would go and drop her off at home. The parents would usually pick her up every day, but on Fridays they had this little market that they would go and work, so he volunteered to take her home every Friday so that they didn't have to worry about her. What a sacrifice. Every time he would drop her off on Friday, they would both get out of the car and just talk for a little bit out there. And that was because the parents didn't like for them to stay in the car and talk. He's like, from the very beginning, the first day that I took her to her house, he thought it was so cute how her grandmother would always be watching them from the window of like one of the bedrooms at the house, and she just looked cute there, like watching them, making sure they wouldn't be doing anything. He's like, she was for sure letting me know that she was watching us. Every Friday it was the same thing. I would drop her off, we would get out, I'd be leaning on my car and I could see the grandma watching us through the window. Every time the grandmother was looking out through the window, she always seemed like she was in a good mood, she was smiling. However, there was one day where it was a Friday, he dropped her off, they're out there talking, and he notices that the grandmother's face is very serious and the complete opposite of what she normally looked like. She normally looked happy, but this time she looked really mad. And as he's looking at her, because he could tell something was wrong, he says that she started to open her mouth and say something, like she was mouthing something to him. She would open her mouth and close it, and then he noticed when she opened her mouth a little too wide, almost like if she was choking on something. He of course looks at his girlfriend and says, hey, is your grandma okay? It looks like she's choking. Does she need any help? Like, what is happening? My grandmother, she asks. He explains that it was actually the first time he ever mentioned that the grandmother was standing there, but he was like, yeah, your grandmother that always stands in the window of this room, like turn around, look at her. So the girlfriend was standing right outside the front door as he's leaning on his car, and she turns to look at the window, which again is like to her side, and she's like, I don't see anything. So he's like, well, come stand where I am so that you can see her. By the time she got to where he was, he couldn't see the old lady anymore, and obviously neither could she, but he tells her, well, she's always standing there, like she's always there watching us when we're talking. He said that she looked at him like really, like he threw her off. She looks at him and says, nobody is inside the house. Both of my grandmothers live outside of the city, so they're not even here. He got very concerned, but obviously it wasn't an intruder because it had been weeks that I've been seeing this lady standing by the window, so it was nobody that was in there robbing, but there was definitely an old lady there watching us every time. The girlfriend was like, well, can you walk me inside? Can we go look? Because I am terrified now. Nobody should be inside the house. So he goes into the bedroom where he has been seeing this lady, and when he walks in there is a dresser right in front of that window where, like, because the dresser was there, no one could possibly stand there and look out the window. It was impossible for someone's face to be right next to the window because of the way the dresser was placed in front of it. His girlfriend didn't even want to get near that window and asked if he could take her to where that flea market is where her parents are working. He agreed to take her, and when they got to the little market, they did explain to the parents why he was going to drop her off there and what happened, and that they went to go check, they explained everything to them. He explains how her parents looked surprised, but they weren't concerned the way that he thought they were gonna be concerned that he was seeing somebody inside their house. They didn't even give him a comment, or like they didn't say anything about the situation until many years later, where he's already married to their daughter. That's when the in-laws finally tells him what happened in that bedroom and who they thought the guy had been seeing every time he would drop the daughter off. The bedroom belonged to the grandmother's sister, and I'm talking about years before his wife, the daughter was even born. That is also where she spent her last days when nobody wanted to take care of her anymore. The parents, his in-laws, they ended up taking care of her, but they explained how this lady was not a good woman, and that was the reason why she had stayed there alone and nobody wanted to take care of her back then. Apparently, before convincing her to go into that house to spend her last days, the only reason she agreed is because she was allowed to bring this suitcase where she had crazy amount of stuff in there where she would practice black magic. When she passed away, the parents did end up throwing all of her belongings away, and they didn't experience anything strange or see anything weird until he was the one who would see her in that window. Ever since then, they're no longer shocked or surprised when people come and visit and tell them that they see an old lady by the window just watching them. He basically says everybody just needs to be reassured that ghosts are definitely near you. They're definitely around you, even though you cannot see them. But what do you guys think? Like, what the fuck? He had been seeing someone that wasn't really there. What was she mouthing to him though? Oh, actually, I don't want to know what the hell.
You get scared easy and you're laying in bed right now trying to fall asleep, you should probably just keep scrolling. I'll say I didn't warn you. This story that a follower sent me is so creepy, I just have to read it to y'all. About my worst fear, encountering a mimic. So Vanessa and her 16-year-old daughter, Olivia, live in this small town in South Dakota. Olivia goes and stays with her father every weekend, so she leaves on Friday afternoons and she doesn't get back until Sunday evenings. Olivia's usually already gone to her dad's house by the time Vanessa makes it home from work on Friday evenings. But on this particular Friday, when Vanessa made it home from work and she pulled in the driveway, she looked up at Olivia's window and she noticed that there was a light on. Figured that she had just accidentally left it on or whatever, but when she went inside, she heard movement coming from upstairs. Vanessa was like, oh, I guess she decided to stay home this weekend, and she went upstairs and slowly opened Olivia's door and was like, hey, is your dad not picking you up today? Olivia said no, I told him to stay, while she was looking down at her journal. Vanessa was like, oh, okay, well, that's fine. I'm going to go make us some dinner. Would you want to watch a movie tonight? There was a really long pause, and then Olivia said yes, and Vanessa thought that she was being a little bit standoffish. Didn't really like her to not have a lot to say. She usually talked a whole lot. So Vanessa texted her dad and asked if they maybe had gotten to some type of disagreement, and that was why he hadn't came to get her this weekend. Vanessa makes her way on downstairs, and she's preparing for dinner and cooking and cutting up vegetables and just cleaning up and stuff. When she looks over and she notices that Olivia's book bag and coat isn't hanging where it normally is. She just assumed that Olivia had taken her things with her to her room, so no big deal. But anyway, she walks into the living room and Olivia's sitting there on the couch, just facing the TV, staring the opposite direction of Vanessa. Vanessa didn't hear her come downstairs or anything at all. She said it kind of startled her because she was just sitting on the couch, just staring at the TV, but the TV wasn't on. She wasn't on her phone or doing anything that she would normally be doing. So Vanessa goes back to the kitchen to check on the food, and she hollers out for Olivia, and she says, hey, can you pick out a movie for us? So she goes back in the living room once she's done checking on the food, and when she gets in there, she notices that Olivia is still just sitting there staring at the TV, and it hasn't been turned on yet. She's just sitting there motionless. And so Vanessa's like, hey, Olivia, did you hear me? I asked you to pick us out a movie. Vanessa sets their plates down and she grabs the remote and decides to pick out a movie herself, and she starts playing The Conjuring. And then she hears her phone dinging in the kitchen, so she's like, I'll be right back. I'm gonna go check my phone. When Vanessa checked her phone, she had a text from Olivia's father. She said when she read his message, her whole body just went cold and stiff, and she had literal cold chills. He said, what do you mean? I picked Olivia up from school and we're having dinner right now with her grandmother. Vanessa took a deep breath and she started walking slowly back towards the living room to see if whatever that was still sitting on the couch. It was still just sitting there, very still, motionless, just staring at the TV. That's when Vanessa realized that she hadn't even seen Olivia's face since she'd been home. Whatever this thing was avoiding eye contact. Vanessa went back to the kitchen. She didn't know what to do. She was terrified. Who wouldn't be? She knew that she had to go back in the living room, though, because her keys were in there. She took another deep breath and she worked up the courage to walk back out into the living room confidently, like everything was normal. It was gone. Vanessa said she don't know why, but she yelled out, "Olivia?" That's when she heard its voice coming from upstairs, sounding just like her, Olivia, and it said, "Mom, I need your help," in the most sinister voice. Hell no. Vanessa grabbed her keys and she ran the fuck out of that house as fast as she could. Shaking so bad she couldn't even put the keys in the ignition. She said that at that moment she was just wishing that she had pushed the start. As she was backing up out of her driveway, she said she looked back up to Olivia's window and there it was standing, waving at her, faceless. Vanessa said she couldn't even breathe at this point and she had never driven so fast in her entire life. Vanessa, I'm gonna need a part 2 to this one, so please, we need to follow up. Story has me scared. I had to tell it before it got dark out because I plan on sleeping tonight. Can't wait to hear what y'all think about this story in the comments. If you have a scary story, please send it to me. You can send it on here or you can send it to my email, which is my username at gmail.
When I was younger, we used to always go to Mexico, right? And we used to stay the night at my grandma's house. And we always used to sleep in the living room. And if you're familiar with the house in Mexico, you know that they don't have a triangular shaped roof like most houses here in the States. The roof is pretty flat, and most of the time there's a stairs. You can go up there and go into the techo or the roof, whatever you call it. And so the way my grandma's house was built, she had a living room, and behind the living room was un patio, like an open patio. There was glass windows and there was doors that led into the patio. And we always kept them closed because the patio had no roof, right? So as soon as you went into the patio, you would look up and you could see the sky. There were stairs that led up there and we always used to hang out. Anyways, we would roll our mattresses to a living room and we would try to go to sleep, right? But every night you would hear a pebble, a rock, a marble, I don't know what it was. You would hear it roll on the roof, but it never landed. And it happened every night that we were there visiting. And we would tell my grandma, she's like, we always hear, everybody hears it here. We never stayed there again, right? Because my parents ended up building a house and an uncle ended up living there. But now that nobody's living there, I've always been curious to go back and just stay there and see if I can hear this. Because it was crazy, the rock would just roll, never landed, and who the fuck is up there rolling rocks? There was no way somebody was even going up into the techo because how would they get up there? Because the doors weren't quiet, they would make a sound every time you open them. And there's obviously windows there. I would be seeing a shadow walk up the stairs or something. So that's been on the back of my mind. I've been curious thinking about it. Maybe one day I need to go back and try to figure out what the sound was. So I don't know. What do you guys think it was? Have you had a similar experience like that? If you have, let me know in the comments.
Spooky story time. A follower that wants to remain anonymous sent me this story and we're going to call it My Ghost Brother. For the sake of the story, we're going to call her Michelle, and she says that this happened years ago. She says that this happened one summer and she was about 13 years old. She stayed up until about midnight and decided to go to bed. Her bedroom was downstairs. Her parents' and her brother's bedroom was upstairs. Again, she went to bed around midnight, was asleep. In the middle of the night, she hears her bedroom door creak open. She opens her eyes and she can clearly see the door opening slowly. She's kind of squinting, can't really see. She checks her phone and it is about 4 a.m. Her eyes adjust a little bit and she sees this short, dark figure wearing this black thing, I don't know, kind of like a cloak. Immediately she thinks it's her brother, so she says, "What happened? What do you want?" And her brother responded and said, "I need help, come help me." Michelle's annoyed. She's like, "Honey, it's 4 a.m. go to bed, not right now." Her brother says, "Okay, fine," closes the door. Of course, doesn't think anything of it. She goes to sleep. The next morning, she talks to mom. They have breakfast. They're playing around. They're laughing. And then she makes a joke about her annoying brother and says, "Oh my gosh, can you believe he woke me up at 4 in the morning? Whatever." And mom was like, "What are you talking about?" Michelle's like, "Yeah, he came to my bedroom at about 4 a.m., opened my door, asked me to help him with something, and I said no." And mom was confused, and she was like, "Are you sure? Maybe you were dreaming." because last night he wasn't feeling good and he slept in my bed. He didn't get out of the bed, not once. Michelle was like, what do you mean? Of course I wasn't dreaming. I woke up, I looked at my phone, it was about 4 a.m. Of course, mom is trying not to freak her out, and she's like, okay, well, maybe he got out of bed, whatever. Mom ends up asking him, hey, did you go to your sister's bedroom? And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. No, like, I was asleep with you. Thankfully, this only happened to Michelle one time, but she still doesn't know what or who this thing was. She said it was short, really dark, not transparent or anything like that. This was a dark figure just standing at her doorway. And it's crazy because she never saw it again, but she says that out of nowhere she will be walking from the restroom to her bedroom in the hallway, and in the living room she can hear someone say, Michelle. And she's like, what? And her mom's like, what? Michelle will say, you didn't call my name. And she's like, I haven't said a word. So maybe her house is haunted, maybe someone is trying to get her attention, but Michelle says that this happens a lot. Thankfully, she's never seen this dark figure thing anymore, but what do you guys think this was? A ghost, a spirit, someone passing by, or something more sinister? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much to Michelle for sending me this spooky story. As always, if you guys have any spooky stories that you'd like for me to read, please send them via DM or email because I'd love to read them. And I will see you guys in the next spooky story. And also, if you like all things spooky, scary, and paranormal, please make sure you follow.
So I believe in the idea of residual energy, the idea that a place can hold the emotions, like the joy or the trauma of something that happened there. I think residual energy actually explains a lot of like ghost encounters or supernatural encounters. But I haven't covered a ton of stories related to this idea, but I did get one that I think is really interesting from someone named Cynthia. And Cynthia said that she has this friend who's severely sick and in pain, and Cynthia decided she was going to move in with this friend in Norfolk, Virginia to help care for her and pay half the bills. Night, Cynthia and her friend were up. It was like 11 p.m. and her friend was just really down in the dumps, and Cynthia wanted to bring her out and make her have a good time, but she couldn't really take her anywhere because her friend was in so much pain. So she's like, let's just go for a drive. Like, I'm off work tomorrow, we can just drive somewhere we've never been before. They get in the car and they head through the HRBT, which is the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. I had to look it up. And they head towards Jamestown. And it's like past midnight, almost close to 1 a.m. when they get to Jamestown, and they're driving down these cobblestone streets and they're talking about the history of Jamestown and like the Revolutionary War. It was a little bit foggy out, but an otherwise nice night. The moon was bright, and she's driving and she's approaching this four-way stop, and all of a sudden she's hit with this sensation of like not being able to breathe. It's like it felt like something heavy on my chest. I couldn't explain it. So I looked over at my friend, and she's sitting there with the same like look of shock on her face. Said she was unable to speak, unable to move, unable to really do anything but stare at her friend. But after a few seconds, the feeling seemed to lift from her chest, and she actually said she felt something like pass through her. So as soon as it does, she asked her friend, like, did you just feel that? And her friend's like, I did. What was that? Like, it literally felt like something just passed through me, and neither of them had an explanation for what they experienced, but they continued driving, just unable to find an explanation, and then headed home. About a year later, her friend has surgery. She's feeling a lot better, and she wants to take a little trip, and Cynthia's like, why don't we go back to Jamestown? You know, like, we can explore the town in the day. It looks really cute. We can just, see what's up. So they head back, and they ended up doing a tour. Guided walking tour about the history of Jamestown, and they're following this guide, and they come up to the same intersection that Cynthia and her friend had experienced that sensation that night. The tour guide stops them as they approach it, and she says, actually, at this spot, a very deadly battle took place and a lot of lives were lost. The tour guide tells them that Americans were firing muskets at British ships in the waterway, and the British ships were sending back cannons and musket fire. His friend grabs her hand and she's like, that's what it felt like that night. It felt like a cannonball hit me. I just didn't have the words for it until now. And Cynthia said she was floored because that's exactly what it probably felt like. And the tour guide ends up saying, yeah, everybody in this area, believes this area is haunted from residual spirits, and we try to respect what happened here. The lives that were lost. Cynthia said that she and her friend have been back a few times, but they actually have never had that sensation again. So she actually believes that the date must have coincided with the battle those years ago. I don't know. I thought this one was really interesting. I really like the historical haunts and things of that nature. But if you believe in residual energy, let me know. If you have a story like this, let me know. We'd love to hear it. A week or two ago, I covered a story submission from a veteran who said that while he was in Afghanistan, he saw a giant. And there was a lot of comments on that video of people talking back and forth saying like, no, this is just a military urban legend. And other people were saying, no, I've actually heard other stories. Like, there's actually some truth to this, or I've seen one. But what I think is interesting is I got an email from someone named Haria. Part of her childhood was spent growing up in Afghanistan, and what I thought was interesting was she said that she had never heard anybody talk about this, but she saw something similar when she was 7. She was born in New York City, but when she was a child, her family moved back to Afghanistan, where her family is originally from, and her father is from Kabul, and her mother is next to the province that's right next to it. province is called Logar. I hope I'm pronouncing these right. By the way, I'm doing my very best. I looked up the pronunciation. But she said in Logar, it's very traditional. People dress in traditional garb. It's mostly villages, and the people that live there live a very simple life. Family used to drive about an hour to visit her mom's oldest sister in Logar, and she lived in a clay house with a big dusty yard, and right outside there was a door that led to like a forest area, and beyond the forest area were mountains that you could see from the backyard. She said that Afghanistan is full of mountains, and the mountain range behind that house specifically was far enough away from the house, but it was close enough that you could still see if someone was standing on the mountain, but from where you stood they would look like a little ant. One day she and her older sister are out back playing, and what they saw was not small at all. She said they looked out on the mountain range and they saw a group of very large women wearing traditional garb, and they were so big that they could make out the details of their clothes. I still remember what they wore vividly. They were these dresses of dark pink and burgundy, and they wore traditional scarves. They also had giant baskets on their shoulders, and she said these women were massive, standing at least as tall as the trees on the mountain. And she said that when they saw them, they ran inside to tell their mother, and their mother just insisted that they must be imagining them. And she said, well, some people in this village are very, very tall. They're very, very large people. She said this was different because a person, even if they were tall, standing on the mountain range would still look small. And in this case, these women were so big that she could still make details out of their faces. So what we saw that day was not normal, and I refused to accept my mother's explanation for it. She lived in Afghanistan for 14 years, and she said she's heard many strange stories while living there, but she's never heard anybody talk about this until that veteran story. So she said she follows this page. So she said I could use her real name. She might be in the comments. I hope I pronounced your name right. Thank you for following. Thank you for sending this. And anybody else, if you have a spooky, scary story time you think nobody else would believe, send it in. We'd love to hear it.
If you think dating's scary, you should try doing it in the Appalachian Mountains. Lipstick on so I can run this mouth. Now focus. Scary story time. 2 years ago, Michaela started dating this guy. They'd been dating for like 3 weeks. Everything was going great. He was normal but quiet and outdoorsy, a little different than what she was used to, but she was all about it. Well, he calls her and he's like, hey, we're going camping, me and a bunch of my friends. It's going to be like 8 of us. You should go with us. Immediately, she's like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm down to go. She didn't really want to go out in the woods if it was just going to be them, but since it was going to be a group, she's like, yeah, let's do it. Well, the day before they're supposed to leave, he calls and he tells her like, hey, bad news, everyone's canceled, but it's fine. We're still going to have a good time. She tells him, like, hey, why don't we just reschedule? I'm not really comfortable being out in the woods with you. I barely know you. He tells her like, I thought you were like a mountain girl. Everything's going to be fine. And she just kind of knew better, but she decided to just go ahead and go anyway. So they're going up this trail and it's like on the edge of like Kentucky and West Virginia. And she said it was about 20 minutes in, then the trail just kind of turns into ruts and all of the things. They get out and hike another mile in. Now, she said they were already way deeper into the woods than she wanted to be with this guy, but they were there. It was fine. They set up the tent. Then it's around dusk. This dude goes over and stands at the wood line, and he's just staring at the wood line. She looks at him like, what are you doing? Finally, she tells him, hey, you're creeping me out. What's going on? He tells her, they always show up at dusk. Who's they? Like, what are you talking about? And he just ignores her. He just keeps standing there. Now she knows this is it. Will be the last time I ever have anything to do with this guy. I just have to get through tonight and it's over. So she's asleep in the tent. It's a little small tent. When around 1 or 2 in the morning, she wakes up to footsteps walking around the outside of the tent. Immediately, she's like, hell no, hell no. She opens her eyes. He's staring at her, smiling. And then he's like, I told you they would show up, like I told you. And he seemed like stoked about it, not scared at all. She could tell it wasn't an animal or a raccoon or anything. It sounded like 2 heavy boots walking around the tent. Then they stop right where her head's at. She thinks, okay, this is it. This is the end. They're going to unzip the tent, snatch me out. This will be all she wrote. That's the end of it. And nothing happens. But she hears this wet breathing through the tent. She's looking at the guy. The whole time he's just like so stoked that this is happening. This goes on forever, it felt like. Finally, she said she must have fell asleep or something. I don't know. She wakes up the next morning. The sun's up. She jumps out of the tent, runs around the tent. She can't find any sign that anyone was out there, but she knows that it happened. He tells her like, hey, we're going to stay another night, right? No, absolutely not, sir. Pack this up. We're getting out of here. So they start walking out and she notices that there's boot footprints going in that matched theirs, like someone was following them, but none leaving, which meant whatever was out there, whoever was out there was still out there, right? She gets back, ghosts him, doesn't have anything to do with him, but she does see a couple of his friends later on, and she's telling them about like what happened and tells him like, hey, this guy, I don't know what's going on with him. And they said, what do you mean? We didn't cancel. He said that it was like 2 weekends later. They didn't know. He gave them the wrong time, and he purposely set it up to get her alone out there. So what was going to happen that second night? So ladies, if you are trying to date in the Appalachian Mountains and they want to take you camping, don't do it.
This girl emailed me and told me that she was teleported to a courtroom where God was prosecuting the devil for interfering with her life. This is a crazy story. So this girl's name is Julie, and that's her real name, and she did say that I could tag her. So one day, Julie is in her room, and she's just kind of cleaning her room, reorganizing it, and she's putting all her things on top of her bed while she's doing so. Well, it got pretty late. She was nowhere near finished cleaning her room. It was around midnight, and so she couldn't sleep in her bed because all of her stuff was on her bed, so she decided that she was going to go sleep in her mom's room for the night. During this time, Julie was getting closer to God. She was reading her Bible. She was doing a lot of things that would bring her closer to God, and so she was experiencing a lot of what she called spiritual warfare. Julie goes into her mom's room. She's just getting ready for bed, and she changes and everything, and she goes to get into the bed, but before she can even get into the bed, she looks at the bottom of the bed, and there's something standing at the bottom of the bed. She said that whatever this thing was extremely tall, and she could see it pretty vividly, like it was there. And there was actually a mirror that was next to the dresser in the bed, and that was reflecting where the bed was. She's just looking at this thing like, there's no way I'm seeing this right now. So she looks into the mirror and to see if she can see the reflection of whatever this thing is, and there's no reflection of it, and she looks back at it, and it's still there. She's just standing there staring at him in shock at this point, when she noticed that the more that she stared at him, the more that he appeared to look different. Went from being just a very tall black shadowy figure to being a very tall blonde figure with blue eyes and this sinister smile on his face. She said that it genuinely looked like it was the Antichrist dressed as a politician in a nice suit standing at the end of her mother's bed. And then she continues to look at him, and he starts to change again. The more she's looking at him, the darker that he becomes. And then she starts to see what looks like stars, almost like a portal to space that's forming around him. So as she's staring at him, trying to figure out what this portal is and what the hell this thing is that's standing at the end of her bed, he starts talking to her, and he tells her to come with him, and he entices her, or tries to entice her, by telling her that he will give her whatever she wants, basically give her dream life if she comes with him. The only thing though is he wasn't speaking in English, and he wasn't speaking out loud. He was speaking telepathically in tongues, but she could understand what he was saying somehow. And at this point she's like, no, I am not coming with you. Are you joking? There is no way I'm coming with you. Leave. Suddenly she feels this weird shift in her mind, almost as if she's moving, and then she feels like she's being teleported, and then she teleports into a courtroom. She said that from what it looked like to her, there were angels as jurors, there was God as the judge, and there was Jesus as the lawyer. And then she looks over at the stand, and she realizes that that person that was standing at the end of her mother's bed is sitting on the stand. And she comes to realize that this is the devil, and he is being convicted of something. Now, she did say that before this happened, as this was happening, she didn't know if she was like astral projecting or what this was. She genuinely was shocked by the entire thing, so she didn't know if it was real or not, but to her, this felt very real. She said that this went on for some time, and basically what happened was that Jesus was telling whatever the person was that was standing on the stand, she's assuming that it was the devil, to not interfere with her life, and God is convicting him for interfering with her life. She said they're speaking in tongues. All of them are speaking in tongues. They're not speaking English, but that she can understand what they are saying. And as they finish up, she is just like that, transported back into her body. She said that when she got transported back into her body, that she felt like she had been gone for a very long time, and she looked at the clock, and it had only been about 2 or 3 minutes. She did end the story there kind of abruptly. I did think that the story was very interesting. It's very different from the stories that I usually tell. I usually tell like scary horror stories, but this was a different story. I'd never heard any story like this before, and I figured that you guys might like to hear it because it's pretty wild. Has anyone else ever experienced anything like this? What do you think happened here? Do you think she was astral projecting? Do you think that she maybe didn't realize that she had fallen asleep and she was having some type of dream? Or do you think that maybe she really did go to wherever this place was and she really did experience this? And do you think that this happened because she was getting closer to God? Because I notice that a lot of times when I feel like I'm getting closer to God, things go wrong in my life. Things will interfere with like the good in my life, and I have to tell myself over and over again, like, this is just the devil. Like, you cannot let this go. I know that sounds very religious. I'm not a religious person, but I truly do believe that the devil interferes when you are doing good, and when you are starting to change your life for the better, or when you are getting closer to God. That's just my personal opinion, and I always have to remind myself that Don't let whatever is happening right now stop you from what you are doing, because everything will be okay in the end. You just basically have to have faith. So I think that she does have faith. She didn't really write anything else in the email. It does sound like it, but it's just interesting to know what you guys would think of this story. She did want to know what you guys think of this story. And like I said, she will be tagged below and she will be reading all the comments. So any thoughts, suggestions, or questions that you have, you can drop them below. But as always, please be respectful.
Snacks in hand, the vibe is set, and once I start, don't eat too much because you gotta stay fun. But come on, bestie, yeah! Hi, bestie, I missed you. You see, I let you do your part this time. I didn't say your part. Can't wait till I make that into an actual, jingle thing and it starts like an episode of a real show. Y'all imagine me having my own network? Wink, wink. Anyway, I posted a story time a few days ago and TikTok was bugging, so hopefully this one you guys get to see it. When I posted it, it had 20 views in 2 hours. It just didn't make sense. But anyway, let's get on with the story. So for the sake of this story, let's call this guy James. Now, James is a football player, quarterback, the popular guy, And James was really good at what he does. He played football really well. So well to the point where he might be the only person on this team that actually knows how to play for real. Now, this brings a problem because if he's the only one and he's the quarterback that knows how to play, a lot of the pressure falls on him. And so when the team loses, which they do a lot, not because of him, because when they do win, it is because of him. And most likely because he was doing most of the work. So boom, last year was not such a good year. They had some games, but most of the games, it was booty. And so James decided that this year, something got to be done. Something got to give. I have the potential, but these people can't see my potential because of my team. So boom, season starts. They play a couple games. They're losing already. James is no, fuck that. I can't keep doing this. How am I gonna finally make my team good? Now, mind you, this is high school, so James is young, and James is on social media, so James is on TikTok. And guess what James saw on TikTok? He saw a TikTok of a girl basically teaching people how to use spells to get everything they want. James is not really a spiritual guy. He's not a religious guy either. He just don't really care for anything. So he's yeah, let me do it. What is it gonna hurt? Now, I'm not gonna tell y'all what he did because y'all like to try stuff, but he did a little ritual so that his team can be better. And it worked. It worked. They started winning games. His team started performing like he ain't never seen before. His whole team, except for one person on the team who is foreign. Now, when the team started performing better, that one kid, let's call him Cash. Cash was cool with, what did I call him? James. Cash was cool with James before. And he's still cool with James, but James be catching Cash side-eyeing him a little bit, But he's not really thinking nothing of it because it's no beef. They still cool. However, all of the other members on the team who are now playing much, much better, it seems they're kind of changing a little bit. Yeah, they're playing better, but they're assholes now and they're just not acting like themselves. They're not listening to their parents. They're staying out late. They're missing practice. Although they start playing better, it's becoming a mess, At first, he didn't care for it until the players started acting like an asshole towards him. He telling them to be at practice at a certain time. They talking about something else. It gets to a point where he actually feels like he's not even part of the team anymore. So boom, one day, he tell niggas to come to practice, right? Not only did they come late, but somebody's missing. Who's missing? It's Cash. I think we called him Cash, right? So he goes up to coach to see what's up, why isn't Cash here? Because he's fully ready to tweak out. Only to find out that Cash actually had quit the team the day before. New setting. Keep up. So immediately, James goes to call Cash. So he calls Cash. And he's yo, what is this I'm hearing about you quitting the team? First y'all acting out of control. Now you're quitting? Cash responds to him in a way that he didn't expect Cash to. Cash said to him, whatever you did, I want no parts of that. You can have that. Well, James yo, what are you talking about? Cash didn't get into any details. He just said, yo, I'm cool. I really am. Thank you for the opportunity, but I'm good. That's the last he heard of Cash. Meanwhile, he got to go back and deal with the team now. So he does. He goes back. He's upset, obviously. They don't really care. They ain't trying to hear none of that. Actually, they made sure to let him know that actually you're a terrible quarterback and we want you off the team. It's like, what do you mean you want me off the team? This is my team. I've been trying to get y'all together. And they get into it and it got pretty heated to the point where James ended up swinging on one of them. And he indeed got kicked off the team. It wasn't like immediately after, but it wasn't too long after either. Because after that whole, interaction, of course, now there's like tension in the team, So that led to more stuff. And yeah, he got kicked off the team. So him trying to do magic to make the team better worked. But he the one that got kicked off. It actually really backfired on him. Then each person that got affected by what he did ended up also getting off the team, like getting kicked off the team one by one, all for different reasons. He knew it was what he did because he ended up seeing Cash after the whole thing went down, and Cash told him, like, I know you did something. Like, I know you did something to the team because once everybody start acting weird, like, I'm Caribbean, I know. I didn't want no part of that because you playing, And so James ended up explaining to him, like, yo, I swear I didn't even know what I was doing. Like, I didn't do it on purpose. And Cash had to educate him on what he did and help him, kind of trying to reverse it a little bit, but not really because he still never got back on the team. He's still a very good player. He's really good. But yeah, it just didn't work out. Even in college, like he kept it just like a football career for him after that never worked out. So yeah, that's the story, y'all. Don't forget to let me know what you was eating in the comments. Don't forget to go grab your ebook. Be like Cash and be the only one that things like that can't affect. Meaning you gotta get the book so you stay prepared. Ready so you don't gotta get ready. Feel me? So keep streaming posts. Okay, I love you. Bye.
I was sent in by someone from Colorado for the story. We're just going to call them C, and they said that this took place in 2017. At that time, they were living with their dad in a pretty well-populated area, but their dad was dating this lady who they said we can just call Ashley. Ashley didn't live in that city. She lived up in the Colorado mountains, and where she lived was very rural. She didn't have a neighbor for miles, and to get to her house was this long driveway, which she kept security cameras on at all times. Said that it was just this giant wooden house in the middle of nowhere. Night C and their two siblings are actually staying at Ashley's house with her two children, and their dad is not there. That night they have dinner, and then after dinner, everybody is assigned chores. C is assigned the chore of going outside where they ate dinner and cleaning off the table. C said that while they're out there, they hear something in the bushes. It's like growling, rumbling, and it's not quiet. It is really loud. The second that they hear this, they're like, oh, hell no. Finish cleaning up real fast and run inside. Now, C does tell Ashley and everyone else about this, but Ashley and the other kids are like, we're in the wilderness. High probability there's an animal in the bushes. No one else seems overly worried. This calms C down, and they're like, yeah, it probably was just a wild animal. He said that Ashley's house had a basement, and this would be where everyone would go to like watch movies and hang out. So they all actually end up heading down there. They're gonna watch a movie, just kind of have a quiet evening. But it's just basically like an entertainment room, but even though it's a basement, it does have windows, so they can still see outside if they're down there. They're all sitting there getting comfortable for their movie night. They hear scratching at the door, like the door that goes to the outside. Ashley hears this. She just says, that must be the animal that you were hearing. There's just lots of wildlife out here. They're all sitting there listening to the scratching that's happening on this side entrance door. And then the next thing they know, they hear it slide open. The door that they heard open was upstairs. It was not in the basement, but they clearly heard this door open. They also said, this is not a main entrance. To get to this door, you would have to walk through the woods and then back up. He said immediately, no, it's not my dad. I've all heard this door open, even Ashley. When Ashley hears it, she just yells out, is someone there? There is no answer. There is no response. They just hear very heavy footsteps thudding across the floor upstairs. And all of a sudden, the footsteps stop, and everyone in the basement, all of them, including Ashley, gets super freaked out. So C says that they all just run into this one room with no windows, which they said, yeah, that was stupid, but we were scared. They're all huddled together inside of this room with no windows. They cannot see what's going on. And then the footsteps resume, and they are loud and pounding right above their heads. He says that they are absolutely terrified. C and their siblings are just praying. Ashley's got her phone out. She's calling 911. They're all still in this room, and then they hear the footsteps stop at the top of the stairs. They're all being as quiet as they possibly can, but then they hear this thing start to descend down the stairs. They can hear it taking each step very loudly, very heavy, very slowly. He and their sister had no idea what to do, so they just start screaming prayers. This thing gets closer, they are all frozen in fear. See their siblings, Ashley's kids, they have no idea what to do. Hear this thing getting closer to the door, and then they hear it get to the door, and then it stops for a second, and then they hear these 3 loud bangs on the door. Everyone in the room goes completely silent and still, and they just wait. He said that everything was quiet for a few moments. Then they hear this thing, whatever is knocking on the door, start to go back up the stairs. They listen to it walk through the house and then leave out the other side. Remember, Ashley is calling 911. She has been trying to get someone to come this entire time. She really hasn't been able to explain exactly what's going on. But once this thing leaves and they hear it walk out of the house, she's able to tell them, like, you need to get somebody here, like, ASAP. And they do. The authorities come out. They search the house. They search the property. They're there, like, in a jiffy. They find nothing. Nothing. The only thing that they find are scratch marks near a window and scratch marks on the floor. That's it. Then Ashley says, I have security cameras. So they go and they pull up the security camera footage and everything is fine. You can see clearly. And then about the time when this thing shows up, it just goes completely black and glitches and then goes back to normal. They catch nothing. Authorities have no explanation. The security cameras caught nothing. 2 years later, C is talking with their brother about this incident and what happened. His brother finally admits, I think I saw what it was. I think I saw it that night. C said that when their brother said that, it made it worse. But brother describes what he saw, and what he saw was a tall black figure that was hunched over, not a shadow, like darker than the dark, had glowing bright blue eyes, really long fingers with what looked like long fingernails on it, but you couldn't tell where the fingernails ended and the hand began because it was just so dark. He says he really remembers the hands because they were gigantic. He says he remembers this thing staring right at him. He told me that since that incident happened, they no longer have any contact with Ashley and Ashley's kids or Ashley's family, but that incident is something that has stuck with them and will always stick with them. Because C's brother, sister, totally convinced that what they experienced that night was not human.
I have filmed this video 3 times and it just will not let me post it, but the craziest things have been happening and I'm going to tell you about it. So I used to do house calls in the hills of the Appalachian Mountains, so far off the grid that sometimes I would be in areas where people did not even have running water or electricity, and because of that I would have to navigate to their homes with the use of like a map and like a compass in my car. Now, I usually say that my stories are changed for the sake of HIPAA and for the sake of storytelling, but this story takes place at my house, so that doesn't really apply here. Now, I'm going to try to explain this the best I can, and it's absolutely insane. But like a week ago, I'm getting ready to go out of town, okay? And in preparation for leaving, I need to get hay for the horses. So I take my horse trailer to my hay guy, I get a round bale, I come home. Now, when I'm trying to disconnect the trailer from my truck, I cannot get the jack of the trailer to pick the trailer up high enough so it's off like my ball, like the hitch, the trailer hitch, right? So because I'm lazy and I'm frustrated and I'm tired and I have so much else to do before I leave town, I pull the pin on my trailer ball, like my trailer hitch, and I drive the truck away. Now my thought is the hitch ball is just going to fall into the driveway, onto the gravel driveway, and I'll find it later, right? Like, makes sense. But I had left the property to go run errands, and I came back to find the trailer ball or the trailer hitch where I thought it would be, and it's not there. Now, for some reference, this is important. My driveway is huge. I have like a big horseshoe driveway in the front, which is great for turning around my horse trailer, and then the driveway basically connects to a gravel road that goes all the way to the back of our property, and then it enters the woods, becomes a smaller road, like a dirt road, and there's like an area like where you can drive like a car or like a go-kart, or like I'll drive my horses, and my chicken coop is back there. Amazing. My TV's just turning on by itself. Fantastic. So much going on right now. So I park my trailer right at the entrance of the woods, right next to the electric horse fence, okay? And so I am searching the gravel driveway. I'm even searching the entrance to the woods for my trailer ball hitch. Cannot find it. So I tell my husband, I can't find my trailer hitch. Like, have you seen it? And he's like, no, but why would you drive away without looking to see if it fell in the driveway? I'm like, I don't know. I didn't think that. I just expected it to fall in the driveway. So he comes outside and he checks the yard He checks the driveway, he checks the farm, he checks the dirt road. We can't find it. So he's like, you know what? You probably didn't have it come away from your truck all the way before you left the house, so it probably fell off somewhere like on the road. And he's like, that's very dangerous. You could hurt another driver, you could bust someone's windshield. He's like, and also that hitch ball was very expensive. So that was a very costly mistake and a very dangerous mistake. And now my husband's a very, very sweet, calm man towards me. And so I know this is bad, right? Like, I didn't think this through enough before I did it. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, I really wish now that I could just find this trailer hitch ball so I know that I didn't hurt anybody, because now I am stressed. Now, in the meantime, I did have to borrow my friend's trailer hitch just to move a few more things before I had to leave for vacation. So I did have her trailer hitch ball, and she was feeding my horses when I was leaving, so I threw her trailer hitch ball into my barn with the pin in case she needed it while I was gone. So all this happens, can't find my trailer hitch ball, and I'm leaving for West Virginia. The plan is to meet my girlfriends in West Virginia. We're going to take my friend's car to the airport, okay, and my truck is going to stay on her farm. So I throw my duffel bag in the back of my truck like 4 a.m. Thursday morning or whatever, and I leave the house. That road that I posted in my last video with like the trees and I said fun date idea, let's like stand in the road, whistle and run, that's the road leading up to her farm. So it's like an area, it's like a farm in the middle of nowhere, West Virginia. You drive up to the house, you're parking on the farm, and all around it is woods, and her farm is just connected to like another 2,000 acres, and there's nothing there. Like it's nothing. People horseback ride on the property, they hunt on the property, but nothing is there, okay? So I'm in the middle of nowhere. My truck sits there from the time I park it there Thursday until we get back on Sunday, okay? So we get back on Sunday, I get in my truck, and I drive back home to Ohio, all right? And when I get home, I'm pulling my duffel bag out of the back of the truck, and my husband comes to say hi to me because I'm just coming back from my little girls' weekend. And he goes, I'm closing my tailgate, and he goes, oh, you found your hitch ball. And I'm like, no, I didn't find my hitch ball. That's Erica's. And then I realized, no, it's not, because I left Erica's in the barn so she could grab it when she came over to feed the horses. So I'm looking at it, I'm like, I don't know, I didn't. And he looks and he goes, that's your hitch ball, you found it. And I'm like, no, I did not find it. And I said, did you put it on there? Did you put my hitch ball on there? And he goes, no, why would I put it on there? You've been gone. And I said, well, did you put it on before I left? And he goes, no, remember, I couldn't find it. Which is true. He tried to find it, I tried to find it, we couldn't find it. So I'm looking to make sure it's not my friend Erica's, and my friend Erica's is in my barn. Just the hitch. No pin, just her hitch. And I'm looking at the hitch that's on my truck, and it is my trailer ball hitch that I always use, that I lost, with the pin in it, which is just not possible because my truck has been parked on a farm in West Virginia for the past 4 days, and the pin has been in my barn in Ohio, and I lost the trailer hitch. So how did I show up back home in Ohio with the trailer ball hitch that I lost and the pin that was in my barn? I am like I cannot figure it out. And at first I was like, well, maybe I'm just so tired and so exhausted because I'm running around 24/7 with, my 2 jobs and my kids and my farm. Maybe I put it on there myself. No, I didn't. I left Ohio without it because I couldn't find it. And I was thinking of what a bummer it was that I lost it because it was expensive, and I was so worried that someone might have hit it on the road and it trashed their car. So I know I didn't find it. And I asked my friend Mindy, I'm like, hey, who was at the farm while we were gone? The only person at the farm while we were gone was the dude that feeds the animals. And I don't know him, and he doesn't know me. We have never met. And he went up twice a day to feed the animals. Other than that, my truck was in the middle of nowhere, West Virginia. No one drove it. No one was there. And the pin was not there. I have No idea. Like, what did, like, Wendigo show up, like, in my woods, steal my trailer hitch when it fell off my trailer, and then transport it to West Virginia and be like, let me put this bitch's ball back on? Like, I don't understand. I don't know how it got there. Thoughts? I mean, ideas? I can't explain it. I cannot explain it. But good news is I have my trailer hitch back. Bad news is it is haunting me, and I cannot figure out how the hell it ended up back in my truck or where it was. So that's that. Oh, and Anna, the house ghost, just turned on the news for you. So
let's read another scary story. This one is from Sienna, and it is titled Face to Face with a Demon. Hi, please call me Sienna, and I'm from the Philippines. I was never the type who believed in ghost stories. I used to think they were just stories people told to scare each other. I do not believe in paranormal encounters, but after that night, I stopped being so sure. I stayed late one December evening to decorate our classroom for the Christmas design competition in our school. The school felt too big for just one person. By the time I finished hanging the string lights and taping the paper snowflakes to the walls, it was past 6, almost 7 o'clock. Everyone else had already gone home. I was completely alone. My classroom was on the top floor. The lights I put up barely reached the corners, and the shadows stretched long across the walls. I told myself I was just being dramatic. It was only a quiet school at night, nothing more. I picked up the extra tape from my desk and walked toward the door. When I stepped outside of our classroom, the hallway felt different. The air was colder. The sound of my shoes against the tiles echoed too loudly, like the building was empty in a way it shouldn't have been. The other classrooms were dark. Their doors were slightly open, and inside of them everything was still. The lockers along the wall looked taller than usual. Even the windows at the end of the hallway seemed darker, like they were hiding something beyond the glass. That's when I saw it. A few steps away from me stood someone who looked exactly like me. Same uniform, same hair, same height. At first, my brain tried to make sense of it. Maybe it was a reflection, maybe it was a shadow. But it was not. The body had no head. Where the neck should have been was only darkness. And in one arm, it held its own head, my head. The eyes were open, the lips were stretched in a calm, wide smile. I froze. I couldn't scream, I couldn't move. My fingers felt numb. The head did not blink. It did not move. It didn't even seem to breathe. It just stared at me like it had been waiting. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Then I remember something a teacher once told us. The land where our school now stood had been soaked in Filipino blood during Spanish colonization. For over 300 years, colonizers crushed revolts with unimaginable cruelty. Rebels and innocents alike faced public executions by garrote or firing squad. Forced labor on galleons broke men like animals, while children were orphaned into begging or worse. Some say those spirits never left. Standing there, I felt like that history was pressing down on me. The hallway felt heavier. For a second, I thought I heard something soft, like a whisper, but when I tried to listen, there was only silence. I forced myself to move, but my legs felt weak. Slowly, without looking away from it, I stepped back into the classroom and slammed the doors shut. The sound echoed through the floor. I locked it with shaking hands. I called out, hoping maybe a guard or another student was still there, but my voice only bounced back at me from the empty walls. Then I saw it again, at the window. The lights flickered once more. The full figure stood outside the glass, the body holding the head in its arm, staring at me. The smile had not changed. It felt wrong, like it did not belong in this world. Like it had climbed out of the past and found me alone. I could almost feel the fear from long ago, the pain, the silence that followed after everything was over. I forced myself to look away and ran to the other side of the room that led outside. My hand struggled with the handle, but it finally opened. I did not stop running until I was out of the building. As I ran down the stairs, my footsteps were uneven and loud. I felt like it was behind me the whole time. Not touching me, just close enough. I thought I heard something that sounded like laughter. My chest burned. My hands would not stop shaking, even when I reached the streets. I never stayed late again. Not long after that, I transferred to another school. Later, I heard that the upper building was permanently closed. No one is allowed to stay inside past 6 anymore. People say the top floor was always cursed. Stories of executions, headless spirits, and violent deaths trapped in the dark. Sometimes I still see that smile when I close my eyes. Oh my gosh, this is so scary, and it's so sad because you're probably right. The energy from so many years of like war and torture most certainly still live on that land. If you guys have any stories you'd like me to read, please email them to me and I will get to them if I can, and I will see you in the next one.
Let's read some more astral projection stories. This happened around 1991. It's the middle of the night. I'm standing in my sister's living room, and it must be a full moon, because even though it's around 1 a.m. and the lights are off, I can see clearly. There's a mixing bowl with popcorn kernels in the bottom, on the floor in front of the TV, and some rental VHS in a pile nearby. I hear a noise and turn around to see my sister's normally very friendly Labrador Retriever looking like Cujo. Fangs bared, snarling, hackles raised. Suddenly there's a bright flash of light, and I wake up like I hit the bed from a great height. I think, that was a weird dream. Eventually I fell back asleep, and in the morning, I call my sister, planning to tell her the story, but she preempts me by telling me about the weird thing that happened last night. They woke up to the sound of the dog snarling at about 1 a.m. Her husband thought there was a prowler in the house, got a gun, and went to find the dog. She was standing in the living room, snarling at the middle of the room. He couldn't see anyone, so he flipped on the light. No one was there. The dog instantly stopped snarling and walked to her bed like nothing had happened. He checked the property and went back to bed. We talked a bit, and I found out they watched some rental movies. And she said, of course we had popcorn. Why? My sister is a little woo-woo at times, so I decided not to tell her about my night. She lived about 450 miles away, by the way. That's a long way to travel. So I've been reading about astral projection for a while after one of my friends mentioned it to me. I started to research it, and a while ago I got back from school and I was really tired and no one was home. I decided that I might as well try to astral project. I closed my eyes and focused on my breathing. I used the rope technique and I was on my roof. I was so excited that I finally was able to do it that I got off the roof and ran down to my friend's house, the one that told me about astral projection. And I saw her brother outside playing with his toy trains. I was gonna go and see inside, but I touched the door, my hand phased through it, and I woke up. I was so excited that I wanted to tell her about being able to astral project, so I ran to her house to see her brother, on the front porch playing with his toy trains. My first AP was accidental. I was sleeping with my significant other, and I know that I was approaching REM sleep when I began to hear an intense swishing or windy sound in my head. It was so loud and unlike anything I've ever really heard before. Soon after, I felt tingles and vibrations, and like an electric feeling flowing all through my body. I literally felt myself, my body, floating upwards out of the bed. I thought I woke up because when I noticed I was elevating, I got scared and reached for my significant other's arms to anchor me down, and I was unable to do so. As I was trying to figure out what was happening, I could clearly see and hear the TV playing. I could see everything in the room, and I just kept going higher and higher. I soon realized that I was a solid 3 feet above my body, still elevating. I reached the ceiling, and I swear I felt my nose touch the popcorn ceiling. That is when I felt myself fall back down onto the bed. As I was falling, it sounded like I was falling out of a plane or off a high building. When I landed, it felt like I slammed back into my body. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but I absolutely loved this experience. On one occasion, my starting point being my bedroom, I had wandered out of my home and encountered a dark entity. In an altercation, I became wounded, bleeding from my arm. I fled back into my home and paused for a moment before returning back into my body. In that moment, I created a pool of blood on my wooden floors and safely returned to my body. In the morning, I woke up, thinking it may have just been a weird, vivid dream. As I got out of bed, I felt like I stepped in some cold liquid substance. To my surprise, it was a pool of blood. The same pool of blood that came from my wounded arm, except I had no visible wounds on my body. My bedroom door was locked. My dog slept in the living room with my sibling. I searched my room for some explanation of how this pool of blood was present. I haven't found one. On another occasion of astral projecting, I would often encounter some strange creatures. Their appearance or energy were never human-like. In one of these projections, I wandered into a strange, abandoned building in the middle of some desert town. After exploring and finding nothing, I walked out. In the distance, I saw a human-like figure with no face, almost blurry, like someone had stolen all the facial features off someone. Either way, it felt eerie and unkind. It pointed out towards me, like it knew or wanted something out of me. I panicked. It felt dark. I attempted to get back to my body or snap out of the dream/realm, but I couldn't. It was like it knew that it was in charge. I finally snapped out of it and woke up in a panic. A week later, I met up with my friend. She lived with her aunt, who happened to be a witch, or a quite spiritual person, you could say. She had always been the type to ask before reading someone, though, out of respect of not everyone wanting a reading or just not aligning with those beliefs. But when I walked into their home, she unexpectedly held my hand and warned me of a dark energy near. She warned me to be cautious and to no longer project. I hadn't told anyone about those 2 occasions, in fear of sounding or having someone tell me I was crazy and it was just all in my head. It felt too real to truly be my mind. And honestly, I'm not sure if it was my mind, but either way, that dark aura or energy I felt, it was not human. Something dark lies in that realm, if one isn't familiar to it. We've talked about this before. I definitely feel like I've astral projected. I've had like really vivid dreams of like floating in space and like actually going to like other places like in our universe or wherever and meeting people. And it feels so real to not be real, you know? Anyway, let us know in the comments if you have ever astral projected.
These stories are getting crazy. A woman named Kat says that she believes she ran into a pair of vampires in San Diego in 2005. She was 19 at the time and she was in the Navy, but she did say she was stupidly walking around alone in the evening. She said she had just left the mall and she wanted to go get something to eat, and then she was supposed to meet up with her friends in about an hour. She's walking down the street and she said she gets to one of her favorite stores that sells novelties or whatnot, and it happens to be right next door to an adult shop. She says that she notices 2 men were walking in front of her, and then she also noticed that there was another man walking in front of them. So they were all kind of walking in the same direction. So Kat describes these men as good-looking gentlemen, well-dressed, and she also clocked that it seemed like they had been picking up their pace coming up behind this other guy. This went on for a few blocks where these 2 guys kept getting faster and faster to this guy in front of them, closer and closer. So she gets to the shops now and she says to herself out loud, but in a low tone, what are they up to? She says she always does this when she's nervous, but she said big mistake, because the moment she let that slip, they both stopped dead in their tracks and turned around and stared at her, and she immediately knew something wasn't right. So there she is, all alone at night in a big city with 2 strange men that just whipped around and stared at her, almost like that of a predator. So this overwhelming sense of dread comes over her, and she knows that she needs to get out of there. So she ducks in to the adult shop because that one was closer to where she was standing. She said that these guys had been a block away, but in a second, as soon as she got in the store, they were already approaching the door. And the person at the counter, which was right there at the door, immediately knew something was wrong because she had sort of seen this all unfold. So she quickly jumps up and locks the door. She says they're on edge now because that girl just saw what she saw. And in that amount of time, they both kind of looked at each other. And as they were looking back at these men, they disappeared in front of their eyes upwards, as in a blur. And then they saw the bottoms of their feet and they were gone. She said that before they had disappeared upwards, they had a cruel and intense look in their eyes, like she said before, that of a predator. So she waited there 30 minutes, all shaken up, and eventually did call a taxi, and she was able to get her butt back to the barracks. Super duper creepy. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you have your own creepy story to tell, I would love to hear it. And if you're new here, you gotta follow for more creepy story time.
This one actually made me cry. My name is Gladys. I'm from Australia. In 2004, when I was 17, I met one of the dearest friends I'd ever had. Her name was Penny. I wish I'd known then just how rare and precious a friendship like ours would be. We were young, new to Melbourne, and fanatically obsessed with Hanson. I still am, don't judge. We met in line at a show when she overheard me loudly bragging about me having a fake ID so that I could get into Hanson's first Melbourne gig. She spent the next few years reminding me what an idiot I was for doing that. From there, our friendship evolved and we became each other's ride or die. Wins, losses, heartbreaks, financial struggles, you name it, Penny was my person. I'd like to think that I was hers too, though I don't think she ever needed me as much as I needed her. If I had a random thought or question, I didn't need Google, I had Penny. Our friendship wasn't perfect. Twice we stopped speaking, not because we fell out, but because loving someone who doesn't love themselves enough can be exhausting. I think Penny stepped back both times because she couldn't bear to watch dirtbag men treat me like crap. Now that I'm married to a golden retriever of a man, I get it. When we reconnected, we'd hash it out. And no one was mad. We understood that everything said or done came from love, and sometimes space was Penny's way of protecting her peace. In 2017, after a period of silence, Penny reached out. She'd been diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. The doctors gave her 4 years, although she was determined to make it 5, just to spite them. We picked up right where we left off. We crammed as much life as we could into those years. Stage shows, concerts, overseas travel, Disney World, road trips, regularly eating an amount of cheesecake we knew we'd later regret. We knew she was dying, but we were focused on living. In 2021, it happened again. I was letting another bloke get the better of me, and Penny couldn't spend her limited time watching the second instalment of my self-destruct spectacular. I understand now, but hindsight is a cruel teacher. A few months later, a mutual friend messaged me to ask if I was okay. That's when I knew that the cancer had won. Although Penny's absence from my life had been entirely warranted, I wonder if a part of her had known that the end was near, and kneeling at her bedside saying goodbye would have destroyed me. She got me in a way that most don't. She always used to remind me that I pretend to be tough and emotionally cold, but inside I'm a little pink marshmallow, and she was right. In 2021, Australia was tightly locked down. Penny's funeral, which she'd largely planned herself, was via video link. A handful of family and close friends were able to attend, but given the state our friendship was left in, I didn't know if anybody would want me there, so I quietly watched from my couch as the fishbowl of red wine in my hand caught my tears. About a week after Penny's funeral, I was home alone, which now was rare at the time since I'd just started dating my now husband, and we were in lockdown, drinking red wine and being... Red wine? Honestly, that night I had decided to have an early and sober night. Now, I'm not someone who remembers dreams, but this one will stay with me forever. In the dream, I wasn't in my body. I was watching everything like it was a television show, but I knew that I was the person that I was watching. Everything around me was black. Not dark, not blurred, just nothing, just black. Then Penny appeared. I think she walked toward me rather than just appearing. I gasped and began to sob uncontrollably, doubled over like I'd been punched in the stomach. Penny placed her hand on my back, right between my shoulder blades. Through sobs, I managed to ask, "Are we okay?" She kept her hand on my back, smiled and said warmly, "We are." I tried to tell her that I loved her, but I couldn't get the words out. I woke up shortly after, still sobbing, just like in my dream, and I could still feel the warmth of her hand on my back. I didn't sleep again that night, but I did have a cup of tea while I tried to make sense of what had happened. I like to think that dream was Penny saying goodbye and letting me know that she still loves me. I haven't had a dream like that since, and I don't expect to. Even now, I still go to pick up the phone and ask her a question before I remember that she's not here, and then I Google it. Thanks so much for reading my submission. I promise I tried to keep it short, but like any good story, it lingered a bit longer than expected. I bloody love the pod. It's spooky, hilarious, and weirdly comforting, like a ghost hug from your nan. Keep doing what you do, and if Penny ever pops up again, I'll be sure to send her your way. She'd love you.
Oh my
Isn't that
God.
sweet?
Hello and welcome back to a series of spooky stories, The Haunted Tea Spill. This series is brought to you by all things spooky and ungodly amounts of paranormal activity. The necklace is per usual. Any commission made off of this necklace goes to the Miss Foundation for Women. Because it's Women's History Month, bitch. Okay, now on to the story. I have quite a few stories, but this one by far is the scariest. When I was very little, my family lived in an extremely old house in small town Montana. It was my mom, dad, 3 sisters, 1 brother, and me. Our family lived there for years, long enough for 3 of my older siblings to move out before we all moved. And through those years, we gathered so many stories. People would claim that there was a guy and his dog chilling in the garage, even if my dad was at work or not home. Sorry. Sometimes this guy would be in the basement in this little workshop area, just working on crafts, but loud enough for people to hear hammering upstairs. Just going along with it. No big deal. Another lady could often be heard also in the basement singing. Pleasant. Not creepy at all. If anyone saw her, it looked like she was just doing laundry. Once everyone gathered around the TV to watch a show, and the rocking chair started rocking on its own, and then an imprint of a person laying on their stomach appeared on the carpet next to my sister. I'm sorry, we're just like pretending nothing's happening? What? I even remember playing with a little girl around my age 4 or so, but when my mom checked on me, I was alone. All those people were fine. People? You mean ghosts. Those ghosts were fine. They just did what I presume they did in their lives and seemed to bother no one. However, there was this one that paced the stairs from the first floor to the second floor all night. My room happened to be right beneath those stairs, with no wall in between or anything to block the view. He would pace these stairs at night mostly. If you acknowledged his existence when he did, he'd race towards you. Bitch, get the fuck away from me. I always ran to sleep with my parents when I'd first hear him. I'd occasionally hear mumbling, but nothing loud enough to make out. My siblings never mentioned him being actively malicious, but they all ran from him too. Well, bitch, if a ghost is just racing towards you because they see that you acknowledge their fucking existence in your home, what are you supposed to do? You're not gonna fucking fight the ghost. You could try. I don't think it's gonna work out very well. I just don't. My siblings that stayed on the second floor rarely left their rooms at night from what I remember, and if any snuck out, they'd sleep in the living room until they felt safe enough to sneak back up. That's a big old fuck no from me. Hell no. What the fuck? Now, I understand that it definitely seems like these little ghosties that are haunting this fucking house, because apparently there's like a fucking family of them, but not a family. Maybe a family? Who knows? I understand that it's like them like doing the things that they were doing in life. Well, okay, maybe it's one of those stacked timeline type situations. That's an interesting theory. Mind you, if you haven't looked it up yet, look it up. However, you're just gonna go with it. I'm sorry. No, I don't. No. I don't think so. I'm also a chicken shit. So just don't take what I say to heart, you know? Anyway, what do y'all think? Rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the least scary, creepy, spooky, 10 being the most. See, now I'm flustered. Because what the hell? If you have a story of your own that you want to submit, you can do so on the link tree in my profile. I'll see y'all the next episode. Stay spooky free.
I tell y'all all the time to stop doing love spells on people. I am back with another spooky story. So Savannah says that she knows that people are going to judge her, but she doesn't think what she did was that bad. It's not like she hurt anyone. In her opinion, she just nudged things. There was this guy, he had been in her life for years. In and out. The guy was always almost hers. Like, so close, but not quite. He said he loved her, but he wasn't ready. Meanwhile, he would date other girls and somehow still call Savannah his safe space. So after years of the in and out, Savannah decided to stop waiting. She watched videos online about love spells and she knows the pros and the cons, and she decided to risk it anyway. She said she found the perfect love spell online. It didn't look dark or anything, just candles, honey, a photo, strand of his hair. She found a strand of his hair on his hoodie that he left at her crib. Oh, that's not stealing. But anyway, the instructions said to write what she wanted on paper. So she wrote that he chooses me, he only sees me, he cannot imagine life without me. According to Savannah, that's not evil, that's clarity. So she finishes off with the ritual, which I'm not going to say the full thing here. And she said at first she didn't think it was working because nothing changed. So this time she decided to go see somebody about it, assuming that she must have messed up during the ritual. So she goes to somebody and they gave her something to slip in his drink. And she says it looked like a potion, like right out of the movies. So the next time he came over, next time that man comes over, she puts the potion in his drink. He drinks it, nothing happens for like a couple of days. And out of nowhere, he started initiating more. He felt like a lot of the time she was carrying the relationship on her back. But this man really stepped up. It is as though this man started making up for lost time. This girl was randomly getting flowers. Savannah says that that man was picture perfect. But then after that, things low-key started shifting. He stopped going out, stopped posting on his social media account, stopped answering his friends. He would just sit with Savannah, watch Savannah. He became obsessed with Savannah. At first, Savannah said it felt good. There was no more competition, no confusion, and no more in that maybe zone. It was just her and her man. When he said that he wanted to quit his job to spend more time with her, he was like, bae, yes. He said this man was obsessed how I liked him. He said that she would be at work and this man would be parked outside her whole shift waiting for her to get off. During her break, he would roll in the car, she would go to the car, and they would, garden together. And she said she saw no problem with this. This man didn't even want to be with his family. For Mother's Day, he did a whole thing for Savannah. Savannah is not a mother. And Savannah, once again, said that she loved every second of it.
Then things started going kind of bad. Eventually, she started to notice that in their intimate life, he started approaching things very differently. It seems like his fantasy in the bedroom was becoming kind of alarming. He had an insatiable taste for a certain fantasy, non-consensual fantasies. At first, Savannah would just go along with it, because that's her man and she gonna stick beside him. But then violence slowly but surely started creeping into their dynamic. They stayed together for 3 years after that, so a lot happened. You wanna know how this story ends? And trust me, it's kind of tragic. Make sure you leave a comment for part 2.
On March 11th, 1974, 22-year-old Barbara Rocky sat at a desk in her bedroom in Provo, Utah, writing furiously. And as she was writing, eventually she paused for a minute to reread what she had written, but she wasn't quite happy yet, so she added a few more lines. The letter she was writing was for her roommates, and she knew it had to be perfect, because Barbara was saying goodbye. So Barbara was a junior at Brigham Young University, or BYU, which was a very religious school where most students were practicing Mormons, but not Barbara. She had chosen to go to BYU because of religion, but really just because she was fascinated by it and thought going to a school structured around faith would be very interesting. But when she actually got there, she immediately felt out of place because her classmates went to church every week for hours at a time, and they all followed a pretty strict set of behavioral rules and values, which wasn't really Barbara's thing. Barbara was from California and considered herself more of a free spirit who liked exploring new ideas and trying new things. So over the last 3 years, Barbara had felt both frustrated and also alienated by the other students' very rigid lifestyles. She'd been hoping that that would change with her new living situation. She just moved in with 7 other girls in January, but now, just 2 months into that, it was already very obvious that those girls did not like her. They were just as religious as the rest of the kids at BYU, and they seemed to think Barbara was weird for doing things like dating around and experimenting with different religions. It just didn't make sense to them. So Barbara had decided that instead of trying to change her roommates' minds, she would just lean into this kind of weird behavior, as they called it. Barbara basically started making them uncomfortable on purpose, like by saying she prayed to the devil, which totally shocked them. And after a while, Barbara had really got the sense that these girls, they weren't just weirded out by her, they were now actively scared of her, which really alienated Barbara a whole lot more. And so all of that was why Barbara was now writing this letter. She was telling her roommates that she was just going to go ahead and leave campus for a while to be with people that actually understood her. And the people she was thinking of were people like Richard Finder, a self-proclaimed psychic that Barbara had connected with after she'd called into a radio show where Richard had been giving psychic readings. And the two of them had connected immediately, because even though Richard was almost a decade older than her, he understood Barbara in a way that no one else in her life did. And ever since, they'd had this really intense relationship that felt both romantic and spiritual at the same time. But since Richard lived far away, most of their relationship so far had been over the phone. And so Barbara thought it might be nice to be physically closer to Richard and also his circle of friends. But there was another reason Barbara wanted to get away from BYU, and that was because she had started to feel unsafe being a young woman on a college campus. So recently there had been some scary national news stories about college women being attacked on campus. One student in Washington State had been beaten and almost killed in her dorm room in January, and another woman had gone missing the following month. And even though these attacks had not literally happened at BYU, it still freaked Barbara out. I mean, especially because these women who had been targeted just looked a lot like her physically, with long dark hair and sort of similar features. And so as a precaution, Barbara had been taking judo classes at school, and even got her best friend, Jerry Hicker, to help her buy a gun. Except Barbara had actually lost her gun recently. She'd not been able to find it for the last few weeks. She'd reported it missing to the campus police, but she really had no idea where it went. But for now, Barbara forgot about the gun and just took a deep breath and finished up her goodbye letter. Then she glanced over at the clock and saw it was almost 10 a.m., and so she had to get to class. So she grabbed the letter and put it inside of her purse, where she also was holding a turquoise necklace, which she planned to sell that day. It was the single most valuable thing that she owned, and she was going to pawn it to get some seed money to leave town. She'd figure out her actual destination based on how much she got for it. As Barbara threw her bag over her shoulder and got ready to leave, she heard a car pull into the driveway outside, which was a relief because she'd actually let her best friend Jerry borrow her car to go skiing the other day, and she had been hoping he would drop it off before she left for class, and so clearly that's what he was doing. And so Barbara hurried out her front door, and sure enough, there was her car, and there was Jerry climbing out and waving her keys, basically being like, "Hey, I'm back." As Jerry handed the car keys back over to Barbara, he asked her if they were still on for hanging out later. But Barbara was busy thinking about getting to class and the logistics of selling her necklace. She had decided that Salt Lake City would have more pawn shops that would pay better, and it was also less than an hour north. And so now that Jerry had dropped her car off, she could drive up there right after class. And so, Barbara just kind of nodded at Jerry and whatever he was saying, and then she took the keys, jumped in her car, and she was off. Over an hour later, Barbara was sitting in her social work class, waiting for the teacher to dismiss them. And as she was sitting there, she began to hear some students whispering behind her. And as they did, even though she couldn't quite hear what they were saying, she began to feel her face get red. Because even though she didn't know if they were talking about her, if they were, it certainly would not be the first time. People talked about her a lot. So Barbara just did her best to try to ignore them. And then as soon as the teacher said they could go, she jumped up and shoved her books into her bag. And then she hurried out of the building to where her car was parked. She got in and pulled out of the lot. And as she made her way down the street, she actually felt a wave of excitement. She couldn't wait to sell this necklace and finally get out of this place. About 3 hours later, Barbara's best friend Jerry walked up the sidewalk to Barbara's house. He thought they had plans to meet up that afternoon, but Barbara never showed. And Barbara did not usually just blow off plans without calling, so now he was actually at her house just to make sure she was okay. And now Jerry noticed that her car was not in her driveway. So he just stood there for a minute, wondering if maybe he should go in and ask her roommates where she was. But he ultimately decided against it and just instead headed back to his place. But after beginning the walk back to his place, he passed by an apartment complex down the street from Barbara's place, and he stopped because he could clearly see Barbara's car parked in the lot, which was definitely out of the ordinary because Jerry was sure she did not know anybody who lived there. And so now, really starting to worry about Barbara, Jerry walked up to her car to check it out. And when he looked inside, he saw there was a note. And so he just opened up her car because he found it was unlocked, and he grabbed the note and he began to read it. And as he did, he felt his heart rate start to pick up. The next day, Wednesday, March 13th, Hayward hustled down a hallway towards a meeting room at the Salt Lake City Sheriff's Office. He was bleary-eyed and basically running on adrenaline because he'd been working this case nonstop since the day before. And he'd just come from a meeting with the ballistics expert who told him the gun that killed this woman was likely a .357 caliber. Now, this was obviously great for the investigation. However, a .357 was not particularly uncommon, so it didn't really narrow things down a whole bunch. However, Hayward had uncovered something that was major for the investigation, and that was the victim's identity. It was 22-year-old Barbara Rockey. So Hayward's team had put a broadcast out over the news the night before about the discovery of this body. And after they had put that out, they had gotten a call from the BYU police about a student of theirs who had gone missing a day earlier. And just a few hours ago, some of this missing student's classmates had come up to Salt Lake City to identify the body, and they had confirmed it was Barbara. Now, Hayward had spoken to some of those kids already, and he had some other officers contacting Barbara's family. But right now, Hayward was on his way to get a formal statement from a young man named Jerry Hicker. Jerry was one of the people who identified the body, and he was the first person to report Barbara missing. So Hayward was hoping he would have information that could point them towards Barbara's killer. Minutes later, Hayward sat down at a conference table across from Jerry, and from the looks of it, Jerry was very rattled. He kept shaking his head and looking away like he was trying not to cry, but Hayward was not a particularly gentle interviewer, so he didn't waste time with condolences or tissues, especially because Jerry was an obvious suspect. He was Barbara's closest friend at school, apparently, and Hayward was sure Barbara was killed by somebody she trusted. So he just bluntly told Jerry that he needed to know every single thing that happened on the day Barbara went missing. Jerry was sort of caught off guard by this level of bluntness, but he took a shaky breath and then explained how he'd borrowed Barbara's car the day before and then dropped it back off at her place on Monday morning around 10 a.m. And then he went to the library for a few hours. He then said he was supposed to meet up with Barbara. They had plans for later that day to hang out, but Barbara didn't show up. And when he went to her house to check on her car was gone. And so he began walking back home again when he actually saw her car down the block outside of an apartment complex that he didn't understand she would be at. Like, he didn't think she knew anybody who lived over there. And he said he walked up to the car, looked inside, and saw there was a note. He tried the door handle, it was open, he reached inside, got the note out, and he read it, and he said it was a pretty disturbing note. He thought it was maybe a suicide note. Hayward nodded. He had seen the note. The BYU police had given it to him. It did seem to be from Barbara, telling her roommates she was leaving town to be with people who she fit in with, but the note was kind of vague, and Hayward really wasn't sure what to make of it just yet. It could be a suicide note, or it could be something entirely ordinary. And the truth was, he wasn't actually even sure that Barbara had really written the letter. Maybe her killer had written the letter. Maybe whoever murdered Barbara was attempting to make her disappearance look like a suicide, or maybe imply that she had run away in the hopes that police would never find her body. And so Hayward had sent the letter off to a handwriting expert to see what they thought. Now, Hayward asked Jerry about his relationship with Barbara, and Jerry explained that the two of them hung out a ton, and she had gravitated towards him since she felt sort of unwelcome at school and around her roommates, who didn't really like her because she wasn't religious like they were. Jerry also told Hayward that Barbara had made the conflict with her roommates much worse by intentionally saying sacrilegious things in order to freak them out. So he said there was a lot of tension between them, and it had gotten so bad that at one point he had tried to find Barbara another place to live. This made Hayward perk up. I mean, knowing that Barbara had a potential domestic conflict was an interesting lead. Even though a group of young, devout Mormon women were not necessarily obvious murder suspects, it was definitely worth looking into. Maybe one of them had been so horrified and outraged by Barbara's teasing that they had snapped and tried to hurt her. Hayward didn't have any other questions for Jerry, so he stood up and told him he could go. He wasn't ready to eliminate anybody as a suspect just yet, but so far, Jerry seemed pretty unlikely. He had an alibi, and he was also the one who reported Barbara missing. And considering it was complete luck that her body was even found at all in the area that it was, it really would have been in the killer's best interest to keep quiet and hope her body was never found. So why would Jerry go to police at all if he was the killer? So Hayward headed out the door to wrangle some officers. They needed to go to Provo and have another word with Barbara's roommates. The next afternoon, just 2 days after Barbara was found in the canyon, Hayward pulled up to a pawn shop on the outskirts of Salt Lake City. If he thought he was tired yesterday, well, he was absolutely exhausted now, because a lot had happened in the last 24 hours. An hour later, Jerry ran into the campus police station with Barbara's roommates following right behind him. After finding the note inside of Barbara's car, Jerry had gone back to Barbara's house to show it to her roommates and ask if they had seen her, because now he was worried that this note was some kind of suicide note. The note was a goodbye letter that Barbara apparently had written, and it said that she was leaving to be with her people, and the tone of it was just kind of alarming. Now, Jerry could tell her roommates thought that he was overreacting to this note, but they had ultimately agreed to come with him to the police to just make sure everything was okay. And so as soon as the officer on duty came out, Jerry explained to him that he had had plans with Barbara that day and she had not shown up, which was very uncharacteristic. And then he explained how he found her car and then also this letter and his concerns about this letter. And the officer on duty said, okay, we'll look into it. And so over the next few hours, the campus police did look into it. They reached out to some other kids on campus and also to Barbara's family, but nobody had seen or heard from Barbara since that morning. And so the police continued to look into this, realizing this could be a missing persons case, but technically not enough time had passed to officially call it that. So in this first day, it was all just kind of preliminary. The next day, almost 50 miles north of the BYU campus, a worker for a Utah utility company hiked up a trail in Big Cottonwood Canyon, a hilly nature preserve on the outskirts of Salt Lake City. Officially, he was there to check on some water lines. But he was also, taking his time and enjoying himself. I mean, this area was beautiful. It was high up in the mountains and very remote and peaceful. So this guy was genuinely shocked when he reached the top of the trail and saw he was not alone. There was a woman up there. But at first, the way his brain processed what he was seeing is he saw this woman who was lying on the ground and she appeared to be nude or partially nude. And he thought, oh, she's sunbathing. Like that's what she's doing up here. But then he's like, it's March. It's cold. And she's face down, and she's definitely totally naked. And then he took a few more steps forward, and his brain kind of processed what he was seeing, at which point he just gasped, turned around, and ran back to his car to go alert the police. Within the hour, Captain Pete Hayward with the Salt Lake City Sheriff's Office drove his cruiser along a remote access road that led to Big Cottonwood Canyon. So Hayward normally loved being in nature. All he really did in his spare time was hunt and fish. But right now, the scenery and remote location were actually kind of an inconvenience because he needed to get to his destination quickly, and that was just very hard to do out here. Hayward had just gotten a call about a woman who had been found dead in the canyon by a worker for a utility company. And while a few responders were actually already there securing the scene, Hayward knew they wouldn't be able to really do anything until he got there. Because when he worked a murder case, every single detail had to go through him. A few minutes later, Hayward saw some police cars up ahead on the side of the road, and also a deputy waiting by a trailhead. And so he pulled over, got out, and then followed the deputy up a steep trail for about 300 yards. And he was pretty out of breath by the time he saw a few other crime scene techs and officers gathered around a bush, where underneath the bush there was a body of a naked woman lying face down on the ground. Hayward walked over and crouched down to examine the body, and right away he could see at least 3 bullet wounds in the woman's back. But other than that, he didn't see any other injuries, and there were no clear signs of decomposition. His best guess was that this woman had been there for maybe a day or so, which was actually sort of a miracle when he thought about it. I mean, this time of year, nobody came out to this area, and if it hadn't been for that utility worker, I mean, she might not have been found for months. Hayward looked next to the body, and he saw the woman's clothes and shoes were right nearby, and each item was actually folded very neatly, which struck him as a little bit strange. Hayward pulled on a glove and began examining the clothing, and he could see that there was really nothing ripped or damaged. And also, as Hayward kind of walked around the immediate area, he noticed the whole scene was just as neat as the clothes. There was no gun anywhere, and no marks in the dirt or signs of a struggle or a fight, and there was no indication that the body had been dragged around, and so Hayward felt pretty confident that this woman was likely shot and killed in the exact spot she was found in. Hayward stood in the middle of the trail and considered everything he was seeing. The neatly folded clothes could have been removed during consensual sex, and then maybe things turned violent, or they could mean the woman was maybe forced to undress at gunpoint. Either way, Hayward's gut told him that this woman's killer was someone she knew. Because the thing was, getting up here from the road was not easy. I mean, Hayward was pushing 50 and knew he was not in the best shape. But even for somebody who was young and fit, it would be hard to force another person all the way up a trail like this. It made more sense that this woman had first walked up willingly with someone she likely trusted, and then that person killed her once they were up there. But Hayward knew, his theory didn't mean much until he figured out who this woman was. She didn't seem to have a purse with her, and there was no ID in the pockets of her folded clothes. So Hayward waved some other officers over to help him flip her body over so they could look underneath her. And when they did that, Hayward saw there were a few bullets gathered in the dirt. They'd clearly gone straight through this woman from the shots in her back. And so Hayward quickly told a tech to go ahead and photograph and bag the bullets for testing, and also to get some of the dirt that the bullets had been lodged in case there was some other evidence mixed in. So investigators in the 1970s did not rely on DNA yet, but they could test for things like clothing fibers or hairs and potentially connect that material to suspects. And so after giving his team their marching orders, Hayward took a deep breath and then headed back down the trail. He needed to go find this woman's name. They'd gotten in touch with Barbara's family, who were obviously shocked and devastated, but they didn't have any useful information for the investigation. They didn't know much about Barbara's friends or life at school, so they couldn't say if anybody would have wanted to hurt her. And they'd had no idea if she had been planning to leave campus for any reason. But apparently, she was, because the handwriting expert had come back and confirmed the note was authentic, and Barbara did write it. So her plans to leave appeared to be genuine, which is what the note basically was about, if you read it literally. But for Hayward, after speaking to Jerry, who talked about the tension between Barbara and her roommates and how she didn't fit in, and also after Hayward literally spoke to all 7 of Barbara's roommates, and they all actually admitted they did not like Barbara, it made Hayward think that the letter from Barbara should be interpreted literally, that she was just trying to flee campus and get away, in particular from her roommates. But the roommates all had solid alibis for the day Barbara went missing. So for now, Hayward basically had to rule out the roommates. But Hayward was not that upset about this, because the roommates had actually given him another lead. According to one of the roommates, right before Barbara had disappeared, she had mentioned that she planned to pawn a turquoise necklace that she owned in Salt Lake City. So Hayward and some other officers had spent the whole day canvassing pawn shops in that area to see if maybe she had actually gone through with it. Now, so far, Hayward had not found the necklace or, found the pawn shop that maybe Barbara went to, but he was very hopeful, maybe too hopeful in some ways. Because, aside from this necklace lead, the investigation really was kind of losing steam. They had searched and fingerprinted Barbara's car, but had not found anything significant. They'd also gotten the autopsy back, and it was mostly unhelpful. The medical examiner had actually counted 5 gunshot wounds, not just 3, so more than Hayward had thought, but they couldn't confirm whether or not Barbara was sexually assaulted. And also, the forensics report had come back, and they had not been able to collect any fingerprints at the scene. And so all of this was swirling around in Hayward's head as he stepped into this particular pawn shop, and he asked the woman behind the counter if they had recently purchased a turquoise necklace. And to his shock, the woman said yes. and then she gestured towards a glass case behind the counter where Hayward could see a long white necklace lined with turquoise stones on a red felt pad. About a half an hour later, Hayward was back behind the wheel of his cruiser, and his heart was pounding and his mind was racing so fast he could barely pay attention to the road, because Hayward finally had a real trail here. The shop clerk's description of the person who had sold that turquoise necklace matched Barbara perfectly. Not only that, the shopkeeper also had a receipt for the sale that showed Barbara was at the store on March 11th at 12:50 p.m., the same day she went missing. But the most incredible part of this new lead was that Barbara had apparently told this clerk that she was in a hurry because her boyfriend was circling the block outside. And this was huge because Hayward and his team had spoken to a lot of people in Barbara's life, and no one had mentioned a boyfriend. Now, unfortunately, the pawn shop worker had not gotten a look at this person, this boyfriend that Barbara was talking about. So Hayward had just taken the necklace and the receipt for evidence, and now he was rushing back to the precinct to make some calls. He needed to see if anybody in Barbara's life knew about this boyfriend and maybe had just failed to mention it for some reason. But as soon as Hayward parked and hurried inside the precinct, he was stopped by a deputy, and this deputy seemed as excited and frazzled as Hayward felt. The deputy told Hayward that he wasn't going to believe this, but they had been continuing their background interviews, and some of Barbara's friends said that Barbara had mentioned a boyfriend named Richard. This was great news for Hayward. I mean, he was literally looking for exactly this information. But this actually was not the reason why the deputy was so worked up, just the fact that she had a boyfriend. He explained that Richard was Richard Finder, a supposed psychic from California who just happened to be in town on a ski vacation at the same time Barbara was killed. And the reason they knew that was because Richard had just called the station completely out of the blue and offered to help. A few hours later, Hayward sat down across an interrogation table from 30-year-old Richard Finder. But if this was as emotional a crime as Park thought it was, Jerry had to be considered. After all, he was Barbara's closest friend at school, and maybe he heard she was leaving town and got mad at her. And then Barbara's roommates, they all seemed to have solid alibis, but maybe one of them had gotten somebody else to kill Barbara. I mean, Park knew the original investigators hadn't found any evidence of that, but they also hadn't seemed to spend much time on the roommates one way or another. They just kind of quickly ruled them out. But Park also knew it could be someone that they hadn't even considered yet, like the utility worker who actually found the body, or maybe another student at BYU who didn't like Barbara and considered her an outsider or a weirdo. Park wasn't sure yet, but he was confident that they'd be able to pick up some DNA somewhere in the evidence, and once they did, they'd find their killer. Two years later, on an afternoon in October of 2007, Park paced around his office and periodically stopped to look at the phone on his desk. He was waiting for a call from the lab, and with each passing moment, he got more and more anxious. So at this point in Park's re-investigation of Barbara's murder, the DNA testing had basically gotten them nowhere. Over the last 2 years, the medical lab had gone over almost every single item from Barbara's case, like her rape kit swabs and her clothes. But they hadn't been able to get any DNA from anything. It either wasn't there or was just too old and not preserved well enough. And so the only thing left to test was the dirt that the original investigators collected from underneath Barbara's body. Park actually had not originally sent in the dirt because he didn't think it would have any DNA inside of it. But it was now the only piece of evidence that he had left. So Park knew that when the lab called this time, he'd either be on his way to finding the killer's name or his case would basically be over. But then Park's phone finally rang. He immediately picked it up, and his mouth went dry when he heard it was the lab on the other end. And before Park could even ask them, they told him they had a profile. They'd been able to find traces of DNA in that dirt sample taken from under Barbara's body. And when Park finally got his hands on that DNA profile and he ran it through their criminal database, he got a name. Based on DNA evidence and a decades-long investigation, here is a reconstruction of what police believe happened to Barbara Rockey on March 11th, 1974. Just before noon, the killer watched Barbara pull up to the sidewalk in her car. The killer immediately walked over and jumped inside and smiled at Barbara, and she smiled right back. And together, they drove to the pawn shop in Salt Lake City that Barbara wanted to go to. When they got there, Barbara hopped out of the car and went inside. And once she was inside, the killer moved over to the driver's seat. And so they basically were going to drive the car from that point forward. And as the killer sat in the driver's seat waiting for Barbara, their heart was racing. They couldn't wait for her to get back outside and get in the car because the killer was in love with her, and they had decided that today they were finally going to make their relationship physical. So when Barbara came outside and hopped in the passenger seat of the car after selling her necklace, the killer very excitedly turned to her and said, "Hey, there's some trails nearby. Why don't we go for a hike?" Barbara clearly hesitated, like she didn't really want to do this. But the killer knew Barbara was leaving Utah, and they knew she had written a goodbye note and was selling the necklace for funds to leave for good. So they kind of guilt-tripped her. They said, "Look, let's go enjoy the beautiful countryside before you leave town." Barbara shrugged and said, "Okay, fine." And so the killer very excitedly drove the car over to the canyon and parked near a picnic area. Then the two of them got out, and as they began walking towards the trail, the killer reached down and touched the outside of their pocket, just to make sure the gun that they had stolen from Barbara was still there. Now, they didn't know if they were going to use the gun or not, but they just wanted to make sure it was there and ready. And so for a while, the killer and Barbara just hiked along this trail, just chatting and making their way up and enjoying the scenery. But at some point, the killer they couldn't wait any longer. They had to make their move. And so they stopped Barbara, and the killer, after making sure nobody else was around, they moved forward and kind of made their move. They touched Barbara in a way that was very clearly meant to be romantic. But immediately Barbara kind of recoiled and jumped back and told the killer that she didn't want that, which immediately made the killer incredibly angry. And so the killer stepped towards her again and could see Barbara had this alarmed look on her face, which made them even more angry. So they pulled out Barbara's gun and they aimed it at her and then told her to take off her clothes. And Barbara, she was horrified, but, she did as she was told, but she intentionally was taking her time. As she took off a piece of clothing, she would painstakingly fold it very neatly, all the while begging the killer not to do this. And then after taking off all of her clothes and stacking them next to her, she continued to plead with the killer. But the killer was so humiliated and so angry that they decided enough was enough. And they shot Barbara right in the chest. And she crumpled to the ground, and they fired wildly several more times until Barbara went still. And then once Barbara was either dead or dying on the ground, the killer just panicked and turned and ran back down the trail, back to Barbara's car. They hopped in and they drove back to Provo and the BYU campus. But on the way there, they stopped and ditched Barbara's purse and the gun. And then when they actually got to Provo, the reason they parked Barbara's car down the road near that other apartment complex was so that when the killer got out of the car, Barbara's 7 roommates would not see them doing so. Then they fled, leaving Barbara's note in the car. Barbara's note was not a suicide note. It was a literal goodbye note that she had written for her roommates. But the killer figured it sort of seemed like a suicide note, so if they left it here, when they came back to find the car and find the note inside of it, they could tell the police that this seems like maybe Barbara has killed herself. It would send the police in a direction that would hopefully not lead back to the killer. It would turn out Barbara's killer was her best friend, Jerry Hicker. The original investigators didn't suspect Jerry at first, mainly because of his cooperation, and since he was the one who also first reported her missing. But they did begin to get suspicious of him when he eventually revealed his violent streak. The year after he killed Barbara, he was connected to a few different rape cases on campus. But they didn't have enough evidence to make an arrest until decades later, when the lab finally found DNA in the soil from the 1974 crime scene. They were able to match that profile to Jerry's DNA, which they had on file from his involvement in another unrelated crime. And so ultimately, Jerry killed Barbara with her own gun, which he had helped her buy so she could protect herself from killers just like him. By the time Jerry was arrested in 2007, he was dying of cancer. He confessed to Barbara's murder for a reduced sentence and served 5 years before he was released. He died in 2014.
Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
What is going on with Jim Carrey? So recently, Jim Carrey was spotted at an award show, and he did not look like himself. Several people noticed that there was something off about his face. Now, a lot of people speculated that he was replaced by a clone, but I have another theory. I think perhaps that was a mimic that was at that award show. Now, there's a very famous story out of the eastern part of the United States. There was this man named Kevin. Kevin lived in a holler in the Appalachian Mountains with his mom, his dad, and his brother and sisters. And On the weekends, his parents would often leave him alone watching his brothers and sisters. So one Friday night, his parents went out somewhere and they put him in charge. Most of the night goes pretty normal, and he gets his brothers and sisters to bed. But later that night, as he's laying in his bed, he begins to hear his brother's voice. And at first, he thought his brother was, up out of bed, like running around the house. But as he gets out of his bed, he starts to notice his brother's voice is coming from outside. And so he thinks, oh no, like my brother's gone outside. I need to get him inside because if my parents get home, they're going to be very mad. So he goes outside of the house, and when he goes out the back door, he starts hearing his brother's voice, and it's coming from the shed. So he goes over to the shed, and he starts yelling at his brother, like, you better get inside, you're going to get in trouble, like, don't make me come in there and get you. His brother doesn't respond. So once again, he says, you better get out of their shed, or you're going to be in big trouble. And once again, he doesn't respond. So he goes to the front of the shed, he opens the door, and he can see this figure over in the corner. It looks like his brother. So he walks inside, and he says very sternly to his brother, you better get inside now, or I'm going to have to bring you in myself. And the shadowy figure moves over towards him. He says, brother, just patted him on the shoulder. And that's when he realized that that wasn't his brother. So he made his way out of the shed, and he ran back inside, and he shut the door, and he locked it. And he goes directly to his brother's room. And when he opens the door, he sees his brother is in bed, passed out. And that's when he starts hearing this banging coming from the back door. And at this point, he was terrified. And he starts hearing his brother's voice calling him from the back door to come outside. But when he looks, his brother is still in bed sleeping. This went on for several hours until his parents came home. His father searched the property. He couldn't find anything. And he penciled it into being just his imagination. Well, not too long after that, he said, once again, one night he was asleep. And he woke up to the sound of commotion coming from the living room. So he got out of bed, went through the hallway, and he came into the living room. And he said that's when he seen his mom. She was sitting in a rocking chair, rocking back and forth. She was turned around to where he couldn't see her face. And when he looked over at the clock, he noticed it was 3:30 a.m. And when he looked back at his mom, she was knitting something. And he said that's when it occurred to him, he just heard his mom snoring in the bedroom. So he turns around, he runs into her bedroom, and sure enough, there she is in bed. And when he wakes his parents and they go out there, there is no one there. But there is needles and a crocheted blanket sitting on the rocking.
We listen, we don't get scared, and we don't judge. Let me tell you guys the story time of this man who was mentally ill and he worked for a witch doctor. So y'all, growing up, I never knew that substance abuse can lead to you being mentally ill. Like, I thought that, this person was actually born like that, until my mom used to tell me that, no, this person was not born like that. We grew up with this person. He was fine. And, he grew up and he started doing whatever he was doing and it led to that. And I was just like, how is that possible? I never understood, y'all. So one time I saw this man on the streets, y'all, and I just felt bad for him because, he doesn't have family, he's not wearing any shoes, he's wearing a blanket, he's very dirty, he looks sad because he's just looking down. And, as much as kids can be mean, they are very empathetic too, right? So he's there asking for money or whatever, and I had a 5 rand, guys. A 5 rand that my mom gave me to go splurge on myself. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to be a good Samaritan. I take the 5 rand, and as I'm about to give this man, my aunt smacks my hand and she takes it. So at this time, I'm walking with my aunt, y'all. As I'm about to give this man the money, my aunt smacks it out of my hand and she picks it up and she's like, if you don't know what to do with money, I'll take it from you. And I look at her like, damn, in front of all these people, you're acting up like that is not a good thing. Like, you're not a good person. I'm looking at her like, damn, girl, she takes the money and she continues to walk and I like run after her and I'm like, hey, boy, why would you do that? And my aunt is like, you should never, when people that are on the streets, use your mind. You should never feel sorry for all of them because this person, after he collects your 2 rands, your 2 rands, your 5 rands, and he only collects coins, no paper whatsoever. After he collects those 2 rands, he takes them to a traditional healer, and that traditional healer uses that money to take your guys' luck. What my aunt was saying is there's a witch doctor that stays around. And say, for example, I wanted to bewitch my aunt. I will send that man that's mentally ill to go and ask money from my aunt. Like, just be persistent every day, asking for money. And then you give that man money, and then that man takes that 2 rand coin that you gave him, and he takes it to the witch doctor, and the witch doctor is going to help me bewitch my aunt through that 2 rand that she gave to that mentally ill person. Do you understand what I'm saying? So she's like, how she found out all of this was there was a time where she had this friend of hers and she was very close to this friend, right? For the longest time she had been wanting a child, but she did not find the right person to do all of that with. You understand? Okay, she finds a man eventually. Like, my aunt's boyfriend was really a nice guy. You know, she decides, no man, let me give this man a child. He treats her well, you know, he does all these things for her. You know, whenever we are around this guy, like, he's just a nice man. Like, whenever we're around this guy, y'all, it's so nice because he didn't have children and he used to take us like his kids, and he would take us to like restaurants, buy us things, you know, every time he comes, and he knows what day he buys us. Like, he was just an amazing guy. And obviously the best friend saw that and was like, never, he needs to come to me and splurge on me and my family. So, okay, eventually time goes on, my aunt gets pregnant, y'all, and we're so excited, like, every single time. I think she was like 5 months at this point, and you could see the belly, and she would make us sleep on the belly, and we would listen to the kid. It was just amazing, man. I was happy for my aunt, you understand? And the best friend, on the other hand, like, you know, she was kind of distant, you know. After my aunt fell pregnant, she was kind of distant. Like, we would be sitting in a room, and I would be touching my aunt's, like, stomach, because I want to feel, you know, because this is weird, you know. And she would just, like, stay, like, she would never, like, really want to, you know, interact. And my aunt would be like, oh, the baby's kicking. And she would tell her best friend, like, do you want to feel it? And the best friend would be like, no, it's okay. One day, she's like, okay, this mentally ill person now keeps on coming around her area to ask her for money. And my aunt used to be like, oh, sometimes she would never have coins. You know, there was a time where she had a 5 rand coin in her bag and she said she doesn't know what happened to it. You know, I think that was a sign, honestly. That was a sign that she did not give this man money, but she didn't know. So this one time, she has a 2 rand coin, guys, and she gives it to this man. Yo, biggest mistake of her life. She gives this man 2 rand, and I think she says immediately after she gave this man money, she felt like something was off. She felt like going back and telling this man, like, hey, give me back my money. Like, I don't want to give it back. I want to give it to you. But in her head, she was like, no, you know, let me just be a good person. And she left. When I tell you that night, she started bleeding, guys. I was there. She started bleeding, and she was just bleeding, and she's just bleeding, and I felt like she was bleeding because the bed was actually wet. She was bleeding and she was losing weight, like she was losing strength, not weight, sorry. She was losing strength, and I'm just like, what's going on, you know? I went to call my mom, and then my mom obviously was like, what's going on? They spoke. I didn't hear the conversation. Honestly, as a youngin', I did not know what was happening, but now I know that she had a miscarriage, y'all. They took her to the hospital, y'all. She was sad, guys. My aunt was sad, and then all of this happening, the boyfriend, the guy that I knew to be my uncle, was starting to act cold towards her, like he never cared about her anymore, like he would never come. They did a cleansing ceremony, I think, with the guy's family and my aunt's family, and he just didn't care, guys. He was so cold towards my aunt, and I just didn't understand, like, this person, Haibo, who's this person, you understand? So my aunt was going through it. So they did the cleansing ceremony, whatever, and that was that. And her and this man, shortly after that, obviously broke up because we don't know what was going on with him, you know. And my aunt was like, you know what, whatever. And you must know, the best friend didn't waste time. The best friend, y'all, did not waste time. She obviously started making the moves on this guy. And, you know, guys, I tell you guys all the time on my page, if you plan on bewitching somebody with a family, make sure you're going into a family that is not strong spiritually. Just because that particular person that you're trying to bewitch is not strong spiritually, don't think that his parents, his aunt, his friends are not spiritually strong. So what happens is this guy started like talking to this girl, and all of a sudden he had feelings for her, and baby boy like quickly realized that, no man, something is off here. Something is off here because, okay, so he knew that something is off, and then he went to make his own investigation, and he found out whatever he found out. I'm gonna tell you guys what he found out later on so we understand. Nah? Cool. Yeah, on a random day he calls my aunt on time. Listen, I know you don't want to hear anything that's coming from my mouth. I know what I did, but listen, come to me to this particular traditional doctor. Like, this person is going to help you. This traditional healer is going to help you, right? So she doesn't trust him. She thinks maybe he's trying to, like, you know, do rituals on her or something. So she's like, no, listen, I'll go to somebody else with my sister, which is my mom. She was not really my aunt, but let's not get into that, you know. She's like, she's gonna go with my mom. Cool. The guy's like, yeah, please. And then after that, please call me back with feedback, and then we'll go to my traditional healer, because I found out something that's very disturbing. Chill. My mom and my aunt and I, obviously, went to this traditional healer or whatever. When you got there, I was also having weird dreams at the time. I remember that's why I went, because there was somebody that was chasing me in my dreams. Every single time I was sleeping with my aunt, guys, I had dreams of somebody chasing me, and I would wake up screaming, right? And as soon as I opened my eyes, I started screaming and I just started running, and I would hit the door. So, you know, everything started to make sense. We get to the traditional healer, and obviously the traditional healer is like, remember the day you gave a person to rent? Remember the day you gave somebody? She was like, I don't remember giving anybody money. She's like, no, remember. And my aunt is like, yes, man, there's this mentally ill guy that I gave money to. It's like, yes, that man is not mentally ill, guys. That man is mentally ill because of drugs. That person is 70% aware. You know, the mind obviously switches off and switches on again. He loses his signal and it comes back. But that man is okay. He gets sent by a traditional, a witch doctor, to go and ask money from a specific person because a specific person wants to bewitch that person. And you gave that person money because somebody that is close to you went to a witch doctor because of the things that you have. And the guy's like, let the dots connect. Come on, let the dots connect. Who in your life was there? And then all of a sudden something good, something big happened. And then all of a sudden they started retracting. Who? And my aunt was like, best friend. And the traditional healer was obviously not denying or accepting. The traditional healer was kind of neutral because he was like, he's not allowed to give names, but you know, you're going to dream about it. And he's like, this person tried to ruin things between you and your man. And then after that, they decided to go for the man. And then the man started having weird dreams. But if you want to find out more, go to the guy. Hi guys, we come back and we find out, y'all, and my aunt obviously dreams about her best friend and what she's been doing, and then she calls the guy and it's like, yo, listen, you know, you were right. And the guy's like, yeah, no, there was a time, I'm not gonna lie, there was a time where I went to this girl, I don't know what happened, but something woke me up at 9 and I decided to go to this girl. I got there, y'all, and every single time we tried to do the deed, like I would see her as like something scary and I couldn't. And I started having dreams of her like trying to kill me, like she was chasing me, and I realized something was wrong. And she said she went to a traditional healer and they told her this. And yeah, man, my aunt cut that best friend off, and she never in her life gave people who are struggling money because of that person. Watch out for the people that you give money to, y'all. And her and the guy, things didn't work out, shame. Like, a lot had happened. They could not move past it. You know, every time they fought, regardless of the witchcraft that was involved, they would remind each other of what happened and all of that. It was just crazy, y'all. It did not work out. As for the best friend, guys, she lost her mind. And the baby that she took from my aunt, she started carrying in public. Like a mad woman.
Technically, I'm not inside of my house. I'm not through the threshold, so I can tell another story about my haunted home in Japan. Let's hope that's a little bit of a loophole for me there. Don't want the activity to get all woken up. So it was one evening in my room, and as I'm walking over to the window to close the curtains, because I close the curtains every single night before bed, to this day into adulthood, I still close all the curtains at night. I can't sleep thinking something is looking in the window at me. As I'm walking up to the window to close the curtain, something catches my eye. And as I look at the window, I can see the closet creature's face peeking out of the closet at me. And I stop in my steps, and I look back, and I don't see anything. And I thought, okay, I imagined it. Take a few more steps forward. There he is again. I can see him peeking out of the closet. I look back. Nothing. At this point, I'm freaked out. So I quickly get to the window, shut the curtains, look back. Nothing. And I'm like, shit, I gotta sleep in this room tonight. So at this point is where I'm wearing my eye mask, so at least I don't see anything in the middle of the night. And I turn off my light, make sure the closet door is closed. I get into the bed, and I put the covers on me, and I put my eye mask down. I rolled over on my side to get comfortable, because I still sleep on my side, kind of like in the fetal position, even to this day. And I remember when I was on my side, I felt my comforter flop over my shoulder. And I thought, okay, well, it probably was in a position where it was going to fall over anyway. I don't know. I'm always trying to rationalize what's happening to me in this house because the experiences are fucking insane. I don't mean to yell. So I feel the comforter flop over my shoulder, and I think nothing of it. And it wasn't until about a moment later that I felt this pressure behind my back, like something was tucking me in. And I flip my eye mask off. I look over, and there's nothing. I look at the closet, and I know I closed it before bed, but it was a little bit cracked. I did not get quality sleep that night. I can, like, when I think about that experience, I can still feel the pressure I felt. Like, you know, when someone tucks you in, you can feel that, like, that pressure on your back. And I remember feeling that as the comforter got tucked in behind my shoulder. But when I lifted my eye mask, no one was there. I would have heard my mom come up the stairs. I would have heard my sister. I would have heard her at least run away. I didn't hear any footsteps. I didn't even hear the closet door open, but for some reason, it was open. And a lot of people like to sympathize with the closet creature. Like, oh, he likes you, or oh, he's just trying to be your friend. Whatever, at the end of the day, whatever touched me still gives me the ick. It's very icky.
I guess that's the thing about men that do this, people that do this, I should say. Something isn't wired correctly up here. Something is very, very, very wrong. Tanya Cash was born and raised in a suburb of Pittsburgh in the 1980s. Her parents, Jerry and Sherry, got a divorce when she was still little, and it was her dad, Jerry, who ended up getting full custody of her, which is not surprising when you learn about what Tanya's mom was really like. She was pretty absent and distant while also being toxic and kind of just flat out mean. Tanya would later say that she felt like her mother didn't want anything to do with her. By 1995, Tanya was 14 years old, and her dad moved in with his now new girlfriend, a woman called Joanne, and a woman who would later become Tanya's stepmother. And with living in a new place came enrolling in a new school, so Tanya would now be attending Cornell Middle School, where she would be entering 8th grade. And what happened in that school, a person that she met at that school, would change the trajectory of Tanya's life forever in the worst way possible. And I think we could all agree that being a new student at a new school is hard enough, but being a new student going into 8th grade is even harder. Because by then, at least in Tanya's case, it felt like everyone already had their own little friend group, and she found it really hard to feel like she belonged. She was a pretty shy person, she didn't know anyone, and she very quickly became a target for bullies. On top of that, things at home were not much better. Tanya was constantly clashing with Joanne, her father's new girlfriend. She also resented her father a little bit for making her move away from all of her friends. And overall, she just found herself feeling quite isolated and lonely. She was caught between a mother who was absent and violent and a father whose new life didn't seem to have room for her. So Tanya began acting out. She started hanging out with the wrong crowd, doing things that 8th graders should not be doing, and then she started sneaking out. And then she began running away from home. She would leave, but she would always come back within 24 hours. And every time that she left, her father, Jerry, would call the police to report her a missing person. Then she would return, and the cycle would repeat itself all over again. Tanya had no stability in her life. She felt like she had no one, and she was looking for someone, anyone, to be a friend. 38-year-old Thomas Host was a security guard at Tanya's middle school. He was a familiar face in the hallway, someone that students were supposed to trust, someone whose job was literally to keep them safe. And he noticed Tanya, a vulnerable girl who was struggling, lonely, and desperate for attention, and what he saw was an opportunity. The two of them started to get to know each other a little bit more, and then it got to Thomas then randomly pulling her out of class just so they could talk. He was friendly, he was kind, he would make her laugh. Then he started buying her gifts. He would bring her candy, and then snacks, and then jewelry. Sometimes he would even give her money. And in Tanya's head, who was 13, 14 years old, all she was doing was innocently making a friend. But in Thomas' head, he knew what he was doing. He was 38 years old, and his intentions were nothing if not dangerous. One day, Thomas caught Tanya skipping class. Keep in mind, this guy is the security guard at her school, also twice her age. But immediately, Tanya thought that she was in trouble, but instead of reporting her, he did something else. He leaned in and he kissed her. And by that point, Tanya had already learned to trust this man. He was really the only person in her life who showed that he cared about her. No one else in her life gave her any attention or love, so this man, right in front of her, acting like he truly has good intentions and acting like he wants to be the person that she loves, that she trusts. She's thinking, whoa, I love this this guy. And throughout the next following month, the two of them began meeting up in a stairwell at the school to share even more kisses. And then it escalated until one day Thomas tells Tanya that he has a good idea. He tells her that she should move in with him. And he phrased it in the way that he was like, I'm just trying to help you. I know you have trouble at home. I know that you run away often. I have a better solution. Move in with me. I could give you a better life. And with me, you will be safe. Very important detail. 38-year-old Thomas lived at his parents' house, lived with his parents. He also had previously been married and he had a child. His son went to the same school as Tanya, the same school that he was a security guard at, and also lived at that same house. So on January 28th of 1996, when Thomas takes Tanya to his house for the very first time, he tells her to stay in one specific room so that his parents wouldn't see her. He told his son to not say anything. He also ends up introducing Tanya to one of his friends, Judith or Judy Sokol, a 57-year-old hairstylist who lived about 4 houses away from Thomas, and he kind of gave Judy the rundown of what the situation was, also kind of making it sound like he was a hero, because here he had this teenage girl who had a really bad life at home, so according to Thomas, he was doing the right thing by taking her in. By this point, Tanya is fully convinced that Thomas is in love with her and that he really wants the best for her. He convinces her to move out of her dad's house. And one morning in February, Jerry and Joanne wake up to find out that Tanya is gone, but they didn't freak out because she did have a history of running away. It wasn't until 4 days later, when Tanya still had not returned, that Jerry ended up calling the police like he had before to report his daughter missing. But because this was a common thing for Tanya, running away, very sadly, authorities didn't really make her disappearance a priority. But before taking Tanya to his own house, Thomas took her over to Judy's house, and Judy agreed to let her stay there for several weeks. So she did, and Thomas would go over there to hang out with them pretty frequently. And because Judy was a hairdresser, she later dyed Tanya's hair to change her appearance so others wouldn't recognize her. It was at Judy's house that Thomas essayed Tanya for the very first time. After that, Thomas decided that it was time for Tanya to move into his house permanently. For the next decade, Thomas's house would be Tanya's prison. He hid Tanya in his second floor bedroom. She was forbidden to leave. She couldn't go downstairs. She wasn't allowed to open any windows. She couldn't make any noise. His parents lived underneath the same room, and yet they had no idea that she was there, or so they claimed. Tanya later explained, quote, I had to sneak up to his bedroom. We were in his room, very quiet. His parents were there. They didn't know I was in the house. He took full control once he knew that I was in his grasp, end quote. Tanya was not allowed to go to the bathroom because she was not allowed to leave the bedroom, so she would use a metal bucket as a toilet, and throughout the next 10 years she was there, she only ever had 3 buckets. She would only get to shower once or twice a week, late at night when Thomas's parents were asleep, and only when he snuck her out of the bedroom and escorted her down to the cellar to take a shower in the bathroom. She, of course, was not allowed to go downstairs to eat, so she had no real meals. Tanya would pretty much only eat whatever Thomas had from his leftovers, which were usually just scraps, and she only weighed 93 pounds at one point. He also taught her which floorboards creaked so that she wouldn't step on those, so that she wouldn't make any noise and alert anyone of her presence. And most days she would just lay in bed to avoid making any noise, either reading, watching TV at a very low volume, or listening to music with headphones on, because the most important thing was to remain silent. Daily, Thomas essayed Tanya. He also had her keep a calendar book documenting this, a detailed written record of the essay, so he could, quote, brag to coworkers and friends about how often he was active. He would brag to his coworkers, who were employees at the middle school that Tanya once attended. At the beginning, Tanya was manipulated enough that she would have excused everything. Everything that she thought was happening to her was love. Then when it began to really take a toll on her, not only emotionally and mentally, but also physically, she accepted that she did not like what was happening to her. But still, she excused it to make Thomas happy. She would sacrifice her own happiness to please him. But then it got to the point where enough was enough, and the way that she was living and the things that he was doing to her, it became too much. It was breaking her. She became a shell of the person that she once was, and she was absolutely miserable. Then the nice act that Thomas was putting up was no longer, and he became really, really mean really, really fast. He would say insane things to Tanya to get her to stay. Whenever she tried to leave, he would threaten to get rid of her permanently and completely. He would tell her that he could do it in her sleep, then throw her in a garbage bag and throw that in the river where nobody would find her. He would tell her that nobody wanted her, that she was stupid, that he was the only person in the entire world that cared about her, and that he was not only capable of getting rid of her, but also her entire family if she did something that he considered to be out of line. And of course, the things that he would tell her would get into her head. When he would tell her that no one cared about her, no one wanted her, no one would go looking for her, she believed him because she was a missing person. In the eyes of the authorities, she had been, yet no one really bothered to look for her. She was declared a runaway, and that was kind of that. From February of 1996 to the spring of 2000, for 4 years, Tanya Cash did not leave that bedroom. But after those 4 years, Thomas decided to change his tactics, he created essentially a new identity for Tanya, started calling her Nikki Diane Allen, and he told his family that this Nikki was his girlfriend and that she would be moving in with them. His parents accepted this story, I guess, and shockingly, no one questioned why this girlfriend had suddenly just kind of appeared out of nowhere and now she was living with them. But enough time had passed that resulted in Thomas now having brainwashed Tanya so completely that he knew that she wouldn't run away, which meant that he could now let her out of the bedroom, and he allowed her to go outside and live as this new person, as his girlfriend, Nikki. Thomas would give Tanya instructions if she was going out, which would only be if he decided that she could, and obviously on his schedule, but he would give her money. He would tell her exactly what bus to catch, where to walk, where to shop for clothing, and which bus to catch to come back home. And Tanya followed his instructions, and she would come back every time, just like he knew that she would. Quote, "It was scary, but it felt good to be out and to breathe in fresh air. But it was scary because I was like a deer in headlights out in the world. I hadn't been out in 4 years," end quote. Actually, the first time that she left the house was for her birthday, because for her birthday, she wanted new clothes, given that she was now 18 years old and she had been wearing the same clothing from middle school and or Thomas's clothing since she had been there. Fast forward to 2005 when Thomas allowed Tanya to get a part-time job at JJ Deli Mart, a local convenience store owned by a husband and wife. Well, I guess Thomas didn't really allow it. Tanya later admitted that she got this job behind his back, but he would just think that she was going there to hang out often, I guess. But what she was really doing was bonding with the people at the deli, the owner Joe and his wife Janet and their daughter. And for the very first time, she saw something that she had never seen before, a healthy, loving family relationship. She watched Joe interact with his wife and daughter with kindness, respect, genuine love and affection. She was seeing what a family should be like. And for the first time in 10 years, Tanya realized that what she had with Thomas was not love. It was everything but. She slowly but surely started trusting Joe and his family. After all, they seemed like really lovely, nice, trustworthy people. And in the way that Tanya was learning about them, they were also learning about her. And it wasn't long before Joe could sense that something was wrong, something was off about Tanya. One of the biggest things that made Joe question that something suspicious, something weird was going on was when Tanya didn't know her social security number, which Joe needed to be able to enroll her as an employee, but she had no clue what it was or where to find it. One day in 2006, Tanya broke down crying at work. Joe asked her what was wrong, and Tanya, who had been silent for 3,692 days, finally told the truth. Through tears streaming down her face, she told Joe, quote, "My real name is not Nikki Allen. My real name is Tanya Cash. If you go to a website for missing children, you will see a picture of me there." Joe could not believe his ears. I have goosebumps, but he was going to help Tanya. He told her to go back to the house one last time. Quote, "Don't do anything out of the ordinary. I will take care of everything. You need to go back there to that house one more time. Don't let on what's happening. Just act normal until the police get there," end quote. So Tanya goes back to Thomas's house. While Joe then called the missing children hotline, he also contacted his son, who was a retired police officer and was familiar with Tanya's case. And finally, on March 21st of 2006, police arrived at 1716 Soul Street. Tanya Cash walked out of that house for the very last time. Quote, "I'll never forget how it felt to step out of the house that day. I got into the cop car, took a deep breath, and thought, it's over. I'm free." She was 24 years old. She had spent 10 years, 1 month, and 11 days in captivity. A week later, Tanya went back to go see Joe and his family, and they had a tearful reunion at JJ Deli Mart. Joe hugged Tanya and later told reporters, quote, "I love her. I consider her my daughter. She wanted to find her dad again, and I'm so happy that I could do that for her. She asked me for help, and I gave it to her," end quote. The day after her rescue, Tanya was reunited with her father, Jerry, at the police station in Elizabeth, Pennsylvania. They hadn't seen each other in a decade. Quote, "We cried, we laughed. It was a plethora of emotions," said Jerry. They went home and they celebrated with cake, and for a very brief moment, it seemed like a happy ending, but it wasn't, because later on, Jerry, her father, would put some blame on Tanya for the last decade of her life. It felt like Jerry nor Joanne believed Tanya's story. They just thought it, quote, didn't add up. They questioned why she didn't leave sooner, and despite Tanya only being 14 years old when she was taken and severely brainwashed, her father believed that she was partly responsible for what happened. According to Tanya, her father told her, "You knew what you were doing." Tanya replied, "Dad, I was 14. Since 2011 and to this day, Tanya and her father do not speak. As far as Thomas goes, he was 48 years old at the time of his arrest, and he was charged with many things, including charges for the SA, interference with custody of a child, and endangering the welfare of a child, but he was not charged with kidnapping because Tanya initially had gone with him willingly. He was released on a $200 bail and suspended without pay from the middle school where he continued to work. Judy, his neighbor friend, was also arrested with 4 separate charges for helping conceal Tanya's identity and keeping the situation a secret. June 26th of 2007 was sentencing day. This is a quote from Tanya directed to Thomas, quote, "You took away my innocence, my childhood. You made me think my family didn't want me or love me, that no one cared or loved me but you. For 10 years, you controlled me." She continued to say that she was no longer his puppet and that she had completed her GED and her first semester of college. Quote, "I plan to go places. The main thing I want to do is help protect children and women from men like you," end quote. Thomas Host was sentenced to 5 to 15 years in prison, and he was released from prison in February of 2022 after serving 15 years. And he still lives in that same house. Like, he still wakes up, takes showers, goes to bed like a normal person living in that same house. Judy pleaded guilty and she was sentenced to 2 to 23 months in prison. And we don't know when she got out, but she definitely never took responsibility for any of her actions. What I am happy to tell you is that Tanya has come a very long way since. She did finish her GED, she attended college, and co-wrote a book about her experience in 2017 called Memoir of a Milk Carton Kid, the Tanya Cash story. In 2018, she married the love of her life, and today she has a happy, loving, and supporting family, including stepchildren and grandchildren. And today, Tanya still speaks at schools and organizations about her experience. She advocates for missing and exploited children across the country. And she wants others who have experienced trauma to know, quote, "There is light at the end of the tunnel. You always have to hold on to that hope," end quote. Yeah, insane story. So happy, obviously, that she got out. It's so hard to imagine that things like this happen. No matter how many times I read stories like this, I am always baffled to my core. Anyway, that is all from me today. Thank you for spending time with me today and for listening to Tanya's story. Hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
The wife of Scientology leader David Miscavige vanished into thin air back in 2007. A 2013 missing persons investigation would allegedly prove that she was still alive, but many former cult members believe she's being held captive in a remote compound somewhere. In 2006, David and his wife Shelley were invited to Tom Cruise's wedding to Katie Holmes, which at the time was a huge deal and was considered the wedding of the century. David attended, but Shelley never showed. The following year, she did attend her father's funeral, but she hasn't been seen in public since. At her father's funeral, it was said that Shelley was being closely watched and constrained by her handlers. She was able to slip away into the bathroom for a moment where another church member had followed her inside. This church member supposedly asked Shelley for help, and in response, Shelley whispered to them, "Listen to me. I effed up, and I'm not going to be able to help you." Some of her family and friends claim to this day that they haven't set eyes on her in over a decade. 6 years after her disappearance, Shelley's close friend and former church member filed a missing persons report with the LAPD. She also posted this photo of her and Shelley with another woman, saying that both this woman and Shelley have disappeared. But investigators closed the case in a matter of hours, despite providing no actual evidence that Shelley was alive and well. A detective even claimed that he personally had met with Shelley, but was unable to say when or where. Instead, over the years, several media outlets have speculated that Shelley might be held at a secretive compound, possibly against her will. Former church members have said that they believe Shelley is being kept somewhere in the mountains, with 24/7 surveillance behind a razor wire fence. Others believe that she may have just left her entire life behind to get out of the public eye and start fresh somewhere else. Shelley's niece Jenna has dedicated her entire social media presence to talking about her aunt's disappearance and how she believes that she's out there somewhere still living her life. She compared Shelley to Ghislaine Maxwell, saying that she helped protect predators, covered up mysterious deaths and reports of child abuse, and even assisted in human trafficking. Jenna is now dedicated to spreading the word about how dangerous Scientology is so that no one else gets sucked into that life like she did, and I've tagged her in my description so you can follow.